מפחד מהעולם, ביבי.
במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אמריקה זה לא שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, להזיז לכיוון הנכון. לא יכניעו לו.
אז אם אנחנו עושים לזה משהו, אז הם...
יש שאלה, אז נניח שהם אומרים משהו. אז אמרו, 80% מהאמריקאים תומכים בנו. זה אבסורד.
You're not real. You're not real.
What? You are? Is any of it real? I mean, look at this. Look at it! A world built on fantasy. Synthetic emotions in the form of pills. Psychological warfare in the form of advertising. Mind-altering chemicals in the form of food. Brainwashing seminars in the form of media. Isolated bubbles in the form of social networks. Real? You want to talk about reality? We haven't lived in anything remotely close to it since the turn of the century. We turned it off, took out the batteries, snacked on a bag of GMOs while we tossed the remnants in the ever-expanding dumpster of the human condition. We live in branded houses, trademarked by corporations, built on bipolar numbers, jumping up and down on digital displays, hypnotizing us into the biggest slumber mankind has ever seen. You have to dig pretty deep, kiddo, before you can find anything real. We live in a kingdom of bullshit.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours.
Sunday, August 18th, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. Now, I have limited time, but for TLAV, that means a lot longer than most, but limited time today. The title is very specific. Now, we're going to go over different angles of this. If we have time, I'm going to cover the more in-depth of the monkeypox conversation at the end of the show today. The majority of what we're going to discuss is around the basic reality that, and it's not just the Israeli government, but specifically the Israeli government utilizes the division of the two-party illusion. This happens in the UK and plenty of other places as well, but from an American perspective, uses the division of our politics to drive in policy, destabilization, control of our anything you want to fill in the blank with at that point. So what's important to consider is not just whether other entities, and you'll hear this conversation, China or Russia, which just as valid to be concerned about, that it's not just about using that division, but as we've all begun to see, controlling that division, funding politicians to achieve certain ends, controlling certain politicians to achieve certain ends, to drive in certain policy that causes certain division that in reality drives in very obvious political, mental, social construct directions that create the division, or rather specifically, keep us mired in a position that is easier to control. Now, you could argue very easily that there are American politicians that find the benefit in this, not even because of the funding and influence that comes because of the support of Israel, but just plenty of other ways that greedy, opportunistic politicians will take advantage of damn near anything. But what we're highlighting today is this technocratic, social engineered on steroids version of what we've always been seeing with the technology today to meet what they've been wanting to achieve. Very alarming. I've been talking about this a lot lately, and I can't stop seeing this. And it's important to see the ongoing, just to let you know what I see going on in the world. That's just the general reporting of what we see, but also to make sure you see the strings attached to it, at least as I see it. And it's almost impossible to miss at this point, because as of the last so many weeks, a lot of very, very influential million-plus follower people have started to dive into this conversation. And I caution, because there are people that will dive into this and get sucked into the first 1, 2, 3 levels of kind of manipulation. And as I've always talked about, whether it's like the Russiagate QAnon concept, the idea that the moment that you break free from whatever you want to call this, when you suddenly see how cartoonish all of the corporate media is, left or right combined, they're ridiculous. There's no really going back from that. But the moment is the point is the moment you step outside of that control structure, there is a number of secondary aspects that are waiting there for you. As we've talked about, QAnon was an obvious example of people that were like, oh my God, I can see through this. And they fell right back into a secondary trap that was obviously still a government operation. And there's levels of this. And this is what it's just everywhere to me right now. And I'm worried that some people might get pulled into becoming exactly what they would like to frame them as, even though right on top of that conversation is the obvious reality of what Zionism is, what they're accomplishing, what they're doing to people around the world. And that gets then driven into a position where they can silence you because of their, and really the point is whether or not you want to argue it's all because of one religion or not, that's your free speech right. You're allowed to make those claims. My point is, whether it's this point I'm making now or the whole conversation of today, just stand back and ask that question. Is it possible that this is something being used or rather created to drive me into a certain thought or a certain position? You know, looking at these conversations today, not from a left-right paradigm lens, but just from a government lens. Even if you don't think that, just as a thought experiment, stand back and go, okay, let's just pretend that this is just one powerful entity in the context of your government in this point, trying to convince you or manipulate you, or rather, I guess any government we're talking about, but in the moment, we're talking about one entity, whether Israel or the United States, trying to drive you into a certain position. And if you look at it through that lens, it's very easy to see how this all lines up. But if you come into that looking at the lens of division through the two-party paradigm, you're going to start to align certain thoughts along. Well, okay, so that's the right and that's the left, and here's and you inherently already have decided one is good and one is bad. People that are trapped in that anyway, and it obviously controls the way you see these things. And my point overall today is not that there's not left and right. People identify with certain political standings, but that there are clearly entities, whether internally, but my point is today, external, that are using that against you right on the surface, funding and driving into people in power or people in ideologue positions, leading platforms out there that are driving you into these positions who are blindly supporting the people we're talking about. So I think it's very important to consider this today, how Israel in particular is using the two-party illusion to drive in chaos, destabilization, and simply controlling policy. So I want to start actually with a point that is, I mean, connected, as all of this will be today, but tangential to this, that I haven't talked about this in a while because my mind is not immediately focused around the larger point, which we should not lose sight of the Great Reset, of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, supply chain is what I was looking for. Supply chain aspects, whether food or otherwise. And these aspects are, and again, I personally see this tying back to the very same entities of one of which is Israel. The actual globalization idea that we're seeing, as much as people that want to see that as, you know, whether left or right lens, who want to see it only through that and can't acknowledge that these people are all playing the same game. I want to make sure we saw this just as an opening point that I think is concerning. As Carrie Kelly, not familiar with the work, looks like I'm following her, but, or him, excuse me, Carrie Kelly. It's, you know, you follow people over the years, and I haven't, you know, on that note, actually, somebody made a point to say that they were basically called me out in a chat. And I'll come back to what I'm just was trying to say right there, and was saying, you only cover Israel, essentially, or you look like you only cover Israel. And I said, well, you know, if you actually just look, you'll see that we cover, even on the shows that may be a title about Israel, like today, for example, we're going to cover a lot of other things that don't necessarily connect with Israel, or have entire shows that are centered around plenty of other topics. And you guys have seen this. We talked about all sorts of things over the years, but right now, obviously, or as you've looked back over the last 15-year period, there's focuses we have, whether COVID at the time, which obviously was right, but we change. And right now, this focus is important. And I personally find Israel and its rather the Zionist influence around the world, guys, this is the topic of our time. It's not just because of the framing of you hate Israelis or you don't like Jewish people, whatever the petty small part you want to see it as. It's because the reality of what Zionism has done to this world is gigantic, and people are starting to see that. And it's not just about that one group, because understand, there are plenty of governments, US and UK and plenty around the world, that are just as complicit today, but it all stems back to that manipulation. So making sure we see that is a very important point. Now, the person who said it to me online, first, my point is the reason if that's even the case, is because obviously focusing on what Israel's doing is gigantic. Even if it was just the genocide we're talking about, that's a huge, earth-shattering topic. And to say you're only covering that is sort of like, okay, well, thank you. But the point was, I'm not. And then I pushed into this point, and the kid ultimately said, well, I was just pointing out that it's just, that's all I see in my feed. And that's okay. That's a fair point. And I said, okay, well, let's reflect on what that shows you, that you're being artificially shown what the algorithm, what the platform wants you to see or think I'm only doing. And yes, I am covering a lot of Israel content right now, as the point I just made. But I think it's interesting how controlled this all is on these flows of, and this is a bigger point about how we're being gamed with these platforms to think and see and feel certain things and channel us very clearly. I mean, it's never been more obvious. But my point here, as I'm simply saying this is a smaller point, that I didn't recognize this person. I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. I follow them. Shouldn't this be somebody popping up my feed? Probably. They don't. The only reason I saw this is because somebody else tagged something. And I didn't even realize I was following them until this moment right now. And I'm thinking to myself right in this moment, how is that possible? How can this person who has 36,000 views, I followed them at some point, so I imagine they're making good points somewhere. I wouldn't have done that. And I've yet to see them until this point. That's not how it's supposed to work. I go through my feed all the time, and they seem, and let's double check. Yeah, I mean, you seem to post pretty frequently. We're being gamed, guys. And just so you know, I look at the for you and the for that, or whatever it is, the both tabs. Anyway, back to the main point. That popped in my head, and I think that the whole point is social engineering. Obviously, we're being manipulated. And one of my big points I want to say as well, now that just popped into my head, before I haven't even got to the point I've got to talk about here, is that ultimately, it's important to me that you listening out there, whatever you think, you see what I'm saying as. And it's certainly possible that I may be one side or the other, and I don't even realize it, because I'm objective enough to point out anything's possible. But I am a nonpartisan person. I fight for what I think is correct, what I think is genuine, what I think is, honest anywhere. And that as anybody actually watching the show over the years, that oscillates between what the world decides is left and right. But my stances have been damn consistent over the years, and I've evolved them with different things. But my point is that if there's anybody out there that's going to be, that you can at least consider more than anyone else is going to be giving you their honest opinion about what's going on, not through a left-right lens, it would be somebody like us, somebody like TLAV or other people in the world that are coming from a nonpartisan angle, that we criticize both sides constantly. So when I'm standing up and going, time out, you're being played right or left or whatever it is, I would hope that would give a little more credence to go, well, he could be wrong, but that's the kind of person that's not going to do this, or at least more likely not going to do this for some political end, because we're criticizing all of them. So I'm hoping that's going to be something that you can consider, that if there's anybody out there that's going to be trying to help you see that you're being played, it's going to be somebody like us. And I want that to be thought about as we go through this today, because one of the major points is, as usual, like during January 6th, like during the trucker convoy and all these different times, I was right there going, you're being played. And a lot of Republicans have come around to see that now, that you're being manipulated, or you're not Nazis and white supremacists, not the majority. There's some of those that exist in any category, but you recognize they are playing a game. January 6th, we're being set up. You saw it. So did I. And I called it out. I'm seeing it again now. So I'm really hoping that a lot of people out there that are on either side of the paradigm are willing to consider how that's being played, because it is being aimed at both sides, in my opinion, more so the right. Now, back to this opening point. Carrie says America lost 440,000 farms in the past 5 years. That's 2,500 farms per month, or 83 farms a day. I read that today and I was like, it's mind-blowing. And we've all seen this developing. It just hasn't stopped. It's continued to go, whether it's accidental burning down of things or forced destabilization or destruction. 83 farms a day. The average age of the American farmer is 58, he says. Farmers need our help. The government isn't coming. It's up to us to support them. Now, my point is, why would you think that's happening? You guys already have it in your minds. I don't need to convince anybody watching this show of how alarming that is, and the reality of what all that really leads to. Control. How are we pretending in any stretch of the imagination, 85 farms a day, 2,500 farms a month, 140,000 farms over 5 years being destroyed without building things in their place that would fill that gap is going to be a good for the planet or for any country. Now, it'll be good for the control structure that wants to then mass produce these things in a way that make you dependent on what they can do or what they provide for you. I know that's super conspiratorial, but it's literally what they're doing. Now, you may not frame it as them doing this on purpose, but they're doing it to save the world from climate change. Okay, whatever you narrative want to put over the top, it puts a centralized power in the hands of these people to be able to decide who gets what and when for your best interest or whatever you want to add to the end. That's crazy that we pretend that's okay. Do we not learn history? Have we not looked at history? All the people that swore and wrote themselves into history as these amazing altruistic leaders that weren't. or that turned out to, it's the same situation over and over. So I just want to make sure we see that this is happening and don't lose sight of all these different angles. And it's all the same people we're going to talk about today doing all of this. Now, this is another discussion from PFAS and dioxins and medical freedom. Same kind of conversation. All the stuff that we talk about. This is from Responsible Statecraft. The headline is DOD defies order to clean up forever chemicals in Arizona. All these stories that this should have been after East Palestine and plenty of other conversations. And the one we even brought up before, which I'll grab right now, I'm sure it'll pop up. It's just crazy to me. This is from March 2023. Exposure to PFAS or forever chemicals can reduce women's fertility by 40%. That is 40. A peer-reviewed study. 2023. Here we are in 2024 where the military's like, no, screw off. We don't care. We're not going to do that, which is what we're talking about. This is not a joke. The story is they have defied an order to do what they were ordered to do, which is clean up the PFAS problem that they've created with what they're doing. And this game we play about stopping you from doing certain things to save the planet, while the people that are actually the 90% of the problem, the governments, are not doing that, whether it's China or the U.S. government, as much as they love to say a lot of things. It says this week, the Air Force claimed it has no legal obligation to comply with an order from the EPA. Oh, so what the hell does EPA even do despite lie and cover things up for the government and then not have any ability to force that government to do the things that they say are needed, even when they pretend they care? It's just so infuriating. And remember, EPA is the one that's been caught lying around East Palestine and 1,000 other conversations for lying about dioxins, for covering up the situation, for gaslighting for Norfolk Southern, and all the lies around all of that, and the shipping of toxic materials to places they knew couldn't deal with it, that I proved on the show, spoke to them directly and proved that they couldn't deal with either PFAS or dioxin. Nobody cared. Too late now. Point is that here they are going, we don't care still. Well, guess what? That's exactly what that produces. Had enough people cared to make the EPA or the government pretending to care about you, cared enough to change. The problem is we got mired in our two-party division, as always. Instead of solving anything, we yelled at each other about what's more important. This stays the same. Little small moral of the story for the whole conversation today. The EPA order required the Air Force to create a system designed to treat high levels of PFAS. Synthetic chemicals known as PFAS that are linked to weakened immune systems. What do you know? I wonder why they want that ongoing, and other health risks. The drinking water estimated to cost $25 million. But they're willing to dump billions over here to foreign governments committing genocide. But God forbid we spend $25 million to, stop the reduction of your fertility of 40%. It says reveal the PFAS levels of up to 5,300 times beyond drinkable limits. Now, this is already identified as a Superfund site, which means they already know that it's very dangerous, that they're spending your tax dollars to clean up, but then not doing that because it's likely to enter the Tucson public water system, and they are finding evidence of that. 5,300 times the drinkable limit. I don't even know why we cover this stuff anymore, it seems, because we all get outraged and nothing changes. And I'm not saying that's your fault. My point is that the people out there that have the ability to do something about this other than what we're doing don't do anything. Those are the people out there that pretend that they are fighting for Trump or fighting for Kamala Harris. That's those people. This is serious, real, in the moment, hurting your children, hurting your family. And your government goes, no, we don't care. And all the people out there screaming that they care about one thing or the other are keeping you stuck in this mindless process. That's crazy to me. Just like we saw with everything else, the dioxins, what was it, 14,000 times the safe limit he was finding in their filters in East Palestine? Nobody cared. Norfolk Southern is making more money now based off this than they were. I shouldn't take this much time. There's plenty more to get to it. I don't have limited time today. But this kills me. I don't hear anybody in the government levels, the left-right paradigm, talking about this. The EPA also identified other chemicals that migrated into the groundwater from a weapons manufacturing facility just south of Tucson, operated by formerly known as Raytheon. That's how this works. The latest chain of events appears consistent with a pattern of the Pentagon's shirking of taking responsibility for its contamination of PFAS. Again, for decades they've known about this, and yet we pretend like it doesn't matter. Still, even though we know it reduces women's fertility by 40% and a hell of a lot of other things, reducing your immune system. And they just don't care, despite knowing about the health effects as early as the 1970s. The Pentagon likely serves PFAS-contaminated drinking water to some 600,000 service members every year, according to a 2022 analysis. The Department of Defense has known about contaminated PFAS for decades, says the Vice President of Government Affairs. It says, according to the July Government Accountability Office, the Pentagon uses AFFF in about 1,500 facilities and over 6,800 mobile assets around the world. That's the issue, the groundwater issue. That's what's contaminating things. You know what that, you think about what that does, like glyphosate. There's no coming back from that, guys. It's going to take thousands of years for the world to get rid of what we've done if we allow it to do what it wants. Like the world minus the pollution that people are causing. And in no way am I suggesting that's some kind of end humanity mindset. My point is that these are the people that keep doing this as they then pass the buck to all of us collectively and say, you're all the problem. Let me tax you for carbon tax and controlling your lives. They don't stop doing this. They're not asking to stop doing this. Then you got Bill Gates pretending like not planting trees and cutting them down is somehow the solution all of a sudden. I never even got to talk about that. It's actually real. These people are not on your side, whether left or right, mind you, because they're all doing the same damn thing. That's the bigger point. Now, I want to go over some things about Israel early, just a quick rapid succession of what I see here before we jump into the larger point of the show today, because I wasn't going to be able to get to the bigger focus. Now, if you haven't seen this article from Robert from August 15th, Israel's horrifying mass rape and torture campaign against Palestinians. He does an excellent job breaking down the B'Tselem report and everything else we can prove. And this is horrific, guys. This is being discussed openly on their corporate media. They're openly debating in their Knesset, like the Congress, whether or not it's okay to rape people, which many of them are openly saying, yes, of course they can. On mainstream TV in Israel, this is a guy, many of them, by the way, but this guy in the orange is literally sitting there saying, this is something, the only problem is that we're not doing this systemically, that we should be systemically mass raping the people in the prisons. That way they don't do another October 7th. That's what he's actually arguing in this show. This is a societal problem, and it's not unique to Israel. It's very prominent, but we're watching it happen in this country right now. Not just in this exact direction, but we're watching them do what they've done to societies over the years, long before the creation of Israel, by the way, for a long time. And I'm talking about Zionists, as much as people would love to make it about something else. Because, my point is, I'll go off for 25 minutes about all the Jews out there, Jewish organizations and Jews individually, that are actively talking about why Zionism doesn't represent them, while Israel is not the state of the Jews, and why it is destroying the world and hurting Jewish populations in general. Now, I'm not even necessarily saying I agree with all that. I do. My point is, that's what they think. So for you to somehow make that anti-Jewish, while you have groups like Jewish Voices for Peace who are protesting against them, it makes you look stupid. The point is, you can call people racist if they're saying things racist. The bottom line is, you can't keep saying, because I say something you think wink, wink means this, that you're saying we're being racist. It's lost all of its power. It's embarrassing for you. And on top of that, we're finding more and more reporting coming out of places like Haaretz, leading newspapers in Israel, of all of the things they call blood libel, things like, Israel itself using human shields. Here is Zachary Foster breaking down this is the Haaretz article that just came out, telling you they're using human shields. And you know why you're probably not shocked about that? Because we've been breaking that down since seconds after October 7th, but also long before that. Haaretz investigation. The IDF operates Palestinian citizens as human defenders to scan tunnels and buildings. How much more? Again, I don't need to say that. We're long past that point. Haaretz has broken down damn near everything that we've told you, and it still gets pushed back from the U.S. media. Both sides, by the way. But he breaks this down, showing you Israeli army systematically using Palestinian civilians who are not even suspected of anything as human shields. You already know all of this. We've covered this extensively on this platform. I'll include this video. I don't even need to play it again. It's a 2-minute video that breaks down, I think, 7 different sources from leading human rights groups explicitly stating that they're using human shields going back decades. What neighbor procedure and before that, and even B'Tselem, a leading Israeli human rights group. As I said, just as many of us have been proving to you since October 7th and long before. And there's Haaretz breaking down the fact that they're telling you they're using human shields. And in this very report, they make the point to say there's no evidence that we can see of Hamas doing this post-October 7th, or before for that matter, based on a UN investigation. But I'll never say it's not happening. In fact, I find that almost impossible. But it matters that we can't prove that, just like with the rape allegations, but they don't want you to know that. Now, this is a point I want you to see. I'm sure everybody saw this discussion. Sad, horrifying discussion. It went viral around the world, of a man who went to pick up the birth certificates of his newborn twins. And as he was gone, the building with the wife and the 2 babies was bombed. Not the whole building, mind you, but what an actual precision airstrike looks like. That's what that looks like. That's what this picture is of. A precision strike on just her apartment building of just her and her twins. There's not even a claim that she works for Hamas. The point is she was a very vocal activist, outspoken. I shouldn't say activist. I don't know if that's the case, but she was outspoken in a sense that you could call it activism on her social media and elsewhere about them targeting children. And then what do you know? They target her and her children in an actual precision strike. So when you see them demolishing entire building, city blocks, and acting like, well, Hamas and human shields, it's just painful how obviously dishonest they are. And again, I don't think anybody out there anymore has the goal to actually say that, other than people who are actually enjoying watching civilians get killed, who are pro-Zionist, who are just so desperately pro their internal U.S., or rather just internal political dynamic. In the U.S., that would be, largely Republicans blind supporting Israel for no reason. The bottom line is, it's obvious that we're being lied to, and people just don't care. Children of Darkness highlight the update as of the 15th. It's only growing. And remember, the Lancet estimates more likely when take it all said and done, and the illness and the under the rubble, upwards of 186,000 killed. Of the provable number from sources that we can confirm, Gaza death toll surpassed 40,000 as at least 37 Palestinians killed in various attacks just since the morning on August 15th. It's saying Israeli military bombed the home of a Dajar neighborhood of Gaza City, killing 6, wounding many more. A raid hit a residential apartment building in Jabalia refugee camp, killing 7 civilians. But guys, this is like a daily, hourly occurrence. There's not even an effort to make narratives about this anymore. They just murder children, and if it gets enough attention, well, then they reactively give you some kind of a narrative, usually consisting of Hamas, human shields, headquarters, whatever you'll take. Then it says Israeli military says one person has been detained in connection with the settler pogrom. Right, so they murder all these civilians based on things that they're not even going to discuss. And then they have a massive effort where people are burning down entire neighborhoods, killing lots of people, and they arrest one person who, by the way, later got released. That's how this works. The new ceasefire talks kicked off. And then, of course, we're not going to get into today, but it's the same thing as always. The reports coming out of the actual mediators are telling you, well, what changed? Netanyahu added new things after they had almost had it settled, and this is from the mediators included. And on top of that, the U.S. says, we agree to the deal, except Israel has to keep continuing the war. Oh, so in other words, you don't agree to the deal because that's exactly that's the opposite of the deal. A ceasefire does not mean continuing to fight. They're acting like you guys that we're all this stupid. Or really, it just shows you they're that desperate. I don't think they know what else to do. So this is what's going on. I mean, it's not a joke. And I pointed this out so many times. I mean, Haaretz has written so much. It does that every time. I hit it. There it is. The Haaretz has written probably 5 or 6 articles about this. How Netanyahu has systematically foiled talks to release hostages from captivity. This, again, it's right there in your face. Leading Israeli platforms, people that are involved with the actual process, even statements from them themselves saying their hostages are secondary. We're going to keep fighting even if we get the hostages back. And yet we still get gaslit by our genocidal leaders or rulers telling you the opposite. Now, Israel Defense Forces comes out when you get the report of 40,000. The IDF themselves on Twitter and says, on this episode of Breaking Down the Media's Half-Baked Stories, we're featuring CNN. 40,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. This is what they write. This is an unverified number provided by none other than Hamas themselves, this time under the guise of health ministry. They keep desperately, childishly doing this. I don't know how many times I can point this out. I said, do you mean the very numbers that your intelligence and your army have publicly admitted were, quote, reliable or, quote, accurate? And I mean before and during and after what's going on right now. I mean, more so before and right now during what's going on. I said, are you really this desperate? I mean, this is from an Israeli platform. This is not a leading one, but a higher up leading Israeli platform. The army checked after October 7th, and they reported that they are reliable numbers. Vice News reported. The Israeli intelligence separately reported that the numbers are genuinely accurate. That's also after October 7th. So how do we pretend that they're just going to go, they're lying? Because that's what else are they going to do? They have to, because that's terrible for them. That makes them look like the thing they are, genocidal murderers, killing children without concern. In fact, laughing about it, posting videos of it, and then saying, you're racist for pointing it out. But yeah, Hamas, you're a liar. Your own people already said this. Your military. But you're going to see this all over the place. People on UK talk shows. I just saw one with Ken. I'm forgetting his name. Ken O'Keefe, talking with an interview, and they just stress this point. Oh yeah, 40,000. Where are you getting that number from? I mean, they're this uninformed, and they are a very, very influential platform in the UK, and they're ignorantly wrong, embarrassingly misinformed, because they blindly listen to what Israel tells them. Journalism. UNRWA wants you to make sure you heard this, because the reality, and we'll come to this point in a second, the reality of, they really want you to think UNRWA, despite being the group in control of the right of return, keeping track of where they're supposed to be returning to in their occupied territory, even having keys and documents, and, the obvious reason why Israel wants to destroy them, because they pretend that's not the case, making them end to terrorists while they're dressing up like UNRWA to carry out military attacks in Gaza, which is this is the fifth time we've seen this, but, it's only UNRWA and the bad guy. It's just everything is this obvious. But UNRWA is telling you displacement never ends in Gaza. Nearly 84% of the strip, about 305 kilometers squared. I don't know what the exact breakdown is in miles for those in the only weird place in the world not using the metric system. It's obviously a lot. Has been placed under evacuation orders by the United States, by the Israeli military. Freudian slip right there. People run for their lives, grabbing what they can and leaving everything else behind. I mean, guys, this is happening multiple times a day now. This is what the original Nakba looked like. This is disgusting. This is like the definition of ethnic cleansing. This is what will be shown going forward, decades, longer than that, pointing back again to showing you what happened during the Israeli apartheid genocide. But just in case you didn't see the last one, Zionism Observer says the safe zone is now less than 12% of Gaza. And even then, we've proven to you they're bombing in every inch of that supposed safe zone. And that safe zone continues to shrink. It says, if a journalist is writing about the evacuation displacement maps, we are willing to provide assistance on background. And they give you a map that you can look at for yourself. It's saying the IDF has issued 11 forced displacement orders in the past 13 days. 11 in the past 13 days. There's 2 days after this, so it's probably more than that. How do you pretend 11 displacements? I mean, that shows you either they're so incompetent they can't keep their own location safe, or they're just torturing these people. And I think it's probably both. Now, and then it says update 12 in 13 days. Yeah, I guarantee you it's more than that right now. Here's the map they're showing. You can look at this for yourself. And look, some of these maps we've already gone over. I can prove to you that they've already bombed many of these locations that they're pointing to, and will again right now. It's obvious and easy to prove, but now you have a map that you can check out where they're breaking these things down. We also have this map. This comes directly from the United Nations. There's pink and red, and basically they're showing you pink and red combined in this map, and all that is different levels of bombing. The point is, these are all places they've bombed. Take a look at the Gaza Strip, and you tell me that this is pinpoint targeting. This is, we just saw what precision strike could look like if that's what they wanted to do. This is destruction. This is parking lot. This is Amalek. This is flattening the area. This is turning it in. Everything they told you they want to do. They're building settlements. They've already told you they're planning to do so. They're demolishing this along with all the human life, all the possible human infrastructure. Check it out for yourself. Now, Ryan points out this is horrific. They don't want the world to know this. And there's been many different breakdowns of this. This is a good visual graphic. Israel has dropped more tons of bombs on Gaza just since October, mind you, than the total bombings of London, Hiroshima, and the Dresden during World War II. And this only keeps getting more. This number's been accurate. Look how much more it is. This number's been accurate for months now. Combined. Look at the Nazis in London. Look at U.S., Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Look at UK and Dresden. These are recalled as like some of the most extensive. Dresden gets brought up as one of the most extensive bombing campaigns. Look at the comparison. The closest one is the Nazis in 20,000 tons. They've used 70,000 tons just since post-October 7th. And here's what Adam has to say. Maybe they shouldn't have raped, murdered, and kidnapped over 1,000 Israeli men, women, and children, and then paraded their naked bodies through the streets and handed out candy to celebrate. If they hadn't done this, then they wouldn't do that. Hadn't have done that, this would be just awful. Let's not forget that 50% of the internet today and probably 90% of this platform are bots. I'm just being facetious, but probably. So just consider this is just another Israeli IDF member sitting back here dumping this garbage on top of you. But either way, There are people that think like this. And think about how disgusting this is. Do you know what you just admitted, Adam? That you're a war criminal. That you're saying that, well, okay, so you're celebrating, and let's not even get into the idea of not knowing what was going on during October 7th, but just knowing that there was an active armed resistance happening, which is something they should celebrate, or just the fact that they're finally being pushed back against while their lives have been rape and murder and pillage and displacement for 75 years. But I'm sure you don't care about that because you see them as subhuman, as we've made clear. But that you're talking about collective punishment, that these people should suffer because how dare they celebrate what happened? Well, they have a right to. That's called, like, the idea that anywhere you want to talk about this, that somebody carries out an act against bad guys around the world. You stand up and say, yay, good. Well, there's another side of that story in the world where somebody else over there is going, that was my family. You see how that works? So the idea that you're saying you're not allowed to have that opinion, and because you do, we're going to collectively murder every Palestinian, makes you a disgusting person. I would be generous by saying human being. And on top of that, littering this with nonstop fake atrocity propaganda that they just continue to put out there. The numbers have diminished. I mean, you realize more than half of these people were killed by the IDF. I mean, I could go off forever, but that's what you get. With this kind of a graph, that's what you get. That's a despicable thing to say. Not the consequences of their own actions, he says. Right. So this is the consequences of their own actions. This bombing campaign of 90% of the Gaza Strip, it doesn't want to load all of a sudden. Fantastic. There we go. Anyway, you get it. For the podcast, same picture. Just demolishing the area, destroying every hospital, school, and mosque, and church, by the way. But he doesn't care because you could fill in the blank. Here's Elon Levy, though, giving you exactly the kind of dumb talking point that this guy's dumping out. If Hamas terrorists didn't keep moving together with civilians every time. Okay, so get this straight. They're the ones telling them to move to this safe location, right? We just showed you 12 times in 13 days they moved them, right? So you're telling me, Elon Levy and Israel, that you move them to a location that you've secured. And if you haven't secured it, then you're the one responsible for whatever's happening. Let's be sure, because this is an occupied territory. You're the effort you're pretending you're keeping them safe, right? By moving them over there. So there's no stretch of the imagination where you could pretend that you're not under an obligation to protect that area. If you can't, then if you're going to say somebody else, who? You mean Hamas, the group that you pushed into power, paid and funded and drove into position, then made them overlap with every aspect of the Gaza society? Or then in any position like police and otherwise had to go through that government at that time to get, yes, you see how that works. So then anybody anywhere actually may be doing that job they call Hamas. Okay, so the point is you're the ones that need to be protecting these people. So you drive them to a new location and he's to tell you, well, they moved along with them. So you're not doing your job? You're not doing your due diligence? You're not making sure No, because the point is either that's not happening or they don't care because it's all the same to them. They're bombing all these Palestinians anyway. I don't even need to convince you guys. We're watching them murder children in the streets. We're watching doctors tell you how they are shooting children, infants in the head, twice with sniper bullets, burning, shredding, demolishing their life. It's everywhere. And this smug, disgusting person is out there acting like you're the one misinformed. He says they wouldn't have to keep evacuating. Of course, no safe zone is safe if terrorists deliberately move into stage. Okay, so you mean you keep moving them 12 times in 13 days because they keep coming along? So doesn't that seem like a gross waste of your resources to just keep moving them in hopes that they do it for themselves? Maybe you should go time out. Let me make sure you're not in there. Now, I'm not even asking for that because I don't believe that they want that or that they would even care. They probably just shoot everybody. My point is, it's a hollow argument. And either this person is actually this stupid to make such a stupid argument that is so easy to break down, or he doesn't know what else to do, or doesn't care. The point is, you're clearly highlighting that you are just shuffling people around and then taking no accountability for the fact that you're moving terrorists around if your narrative is correct. Frankly, I don't believe it is. And then again, people, your pretext to killing civilians. Everybody sees through these people. I mean, it's embarrassing. The governments and people in power, the donor class, are the ones pretending like nothing's changing. Too late. Ryan Rosbiani, just this little meme or graphic, it really is heartbreaking, and it perfectly encapsulates what's going on. 2024. It says, my father was born in a tent in 1948, the first Nakba. Born in a tent because they were displaced, ethnically cleansed, and raped and murdered and pillaged and pushed into these tents. So his father was born in a tent in 1948. Now he died in a tent in 2024. That's the lifespan of these people. They've never got to regain their freedom and self-determination, their integrity. I shouldn't say that because, quite frankly, I see more integrity every moment in these people in Palestine than I do in the vast majority of Israelis. The bottom line is that this is undeniable. You have displaced these people. You have kept them in this position. You have bombed and murdered and displaced them over and over. And he never got it back. It is brutal. It's very sad. On top of that, we have children starving as I'm talking about this right now. Every single day, we have more children starving to death because they are deliberately keeping food from these people, as everybody, including Israelis, are telling you now, as they posted videos laughing about it. But, fake news, racist, because you can literally see them laughing and saying we're stopping the aid because Hamas will use it. Or how about this? How about for all people right there going, you're a liar? Well, guess what? Here are Israeli IDF members going, hey, UNRWA, thanks for the food you sent for these starving children. We're eating it. They've got a room full of bags of flour that are sent for them, not for Israel. And here they are. Thanks a lot to UNRWA for taking care of Israeli soldiers who won't be hungry. We love you, UNRWA. Thanks, UNRWA, for the flour. You're the best. They posted this on their own social media. So as they're the ones telling you you're lying, and that Elon will tell you we're giving them more of aid than ever before. It's piling up. Here they are watching them starve, taking it from them and laughing about them starving. Most moral army in the world. I mean, that's become its own insult, by the way. And again, they're disguising themselves as UNRWA members as well as anything else to carry out military attacks, which is in and of itself a crime. But we should obviously ask whether or not we're even, frankly, they haven't shown any evidence UNRWA's even part of any of this. The U.S. and Canada have called them out for that. But even if we do, we should obviously be going, well, maybe that's them in the first place. Don't blindly assume that and be as stupid as a Zionist would be, but ask that and then seek to verify it. Now, and I'm going to skip this for time, but Haaretz put out an article that's mind-blowing to me. And this is what their title was. This is from August 18th. It's today. The ultra-nationalist cancer even reaches Israel's hospitals. Now, this story is so messed up. A woman goes into this hospital who is pregnant. Her husband and their children have Israeli citizenship. Now, it's actually not even clear whether she might, but they didn't have the paperwork on hand. But at the end of the day, the point is she was in the hospital, didn't have the proof of her identification, and she was in immediate pregnancy. She was going into labor. And because she couldn't prove, they called the police. The police then took her, and they were supposed to take her to a place where she can get care. They drove her to an outpost in the middle of the West Bank and dropped her there and left. A woman in labor who is a Palestinian, rather an Arab. I mean, guys, this is the exact kind of thing that we pretend we've always been fighting. These are the evil people of the world, that you could justify doing this to a pregnant woman, an unborn child, because you don't like who they are as a nationality, even though her husband and children have Israeli citizenship. Yeah, let's pretend like it's not only about Zionism, okay? This is disgusting racism. Now, Kim.com makes a very contentious point that I think is very important. Now, we've briefly in the past mentioned the protocols of Zion. I think at least a few times, but never really gone too deep on it for clear a reason I'll tell you now. That ultimately, as even he highlights in this, it's a thing that has been, it's sort of like a good example is the whole Zog term that C.J. Hopkins freaked out and called me a white nationalist or Nazi for not even saying Zog, but for saying that our government is occupied. The point is that term, even though it's very easy and accurate to prove that our government is completely influenced and occupied, manipulated, influenced through Israel and others, by the way, but it's provable at this point, and half the country is now seeing this, he's decided to call me a white supremacist because in the past, you've seen likely AIPAC, ADL manipulating Zionists use that to make it, that's my point. The word Zog as some kind of only applying to Jewish people. So he's unable to see the point I'm making because he only can see that term through that past lens. You see my point? Even though there's accurate realities around it. Now, the point of this discussion is that there's a lot of history around this and how it's been used intentionally to sort of water live. The point is, as Kim makes this very well, very clear, the info that comes through this document, we're watching play out today. We are literally seeing the reality of what this government is. And it's not just Israel, but it's Zionism. Even more so, if we want to go back to things like Sabbateism and these historical ideas of infiltrating religion and government, we're watching this play out. So the point in saying that is that ultimately, whether or not you think this document was cobbled together in the past to sort of lay shade for what Zionism, the same way we're talking about with Judaism and Zionism, the idea that they act like we're protecting Jews when in reality they're sort of using them as a human shield dynamic. And a lot of Jews are calling this out today. The same kind of concept we made about this point, is saying that this document was made with a lot of true information, but meant to slant in a way that made you feel like you're being racist for even talking about it. The reality is you'll see written here, it's obvious what's happening. Whatever you think about the past document, think about the reality of the words being spoken here. As Kim writes, this may be the most important post you'll ever read because it provides a simple explanation about why our world is being destroyed by design. He says, I'm not anti-Semitic or a Nazi. It's so stupid we even have to say that out loud because you're pointing out things that a government are doing and what their ideology is driving, not religion. Ideology. Now it says, he writes, I'm simply a former hacker with great analytical skills who understands what's happening in the world. At the end of this post, I will quote from a world domination plan. He says, you will recognize the truth immediately because that's what's currently happening in the world. Now, whether you think this document was some racist trope or not, you won't be able to deny that what we're seeing is exactly what's being written down, or rather what that was written about. Now it says, today's reality suggests that this is real. Now it says, and some people are coming to this conclusion now because they're seeing it, but there's been a lot of people that have been genuinely critical of Israeli government policy in these same ways, whether from the prophetic angle, whether from any number of aspects, because it's obvious. It's been there for a long time. But a lot of people, not to suggest Kim, I'm just saying in general, a lot of people out there are just now finally seeing this. My early warning about falling into one of those traps. Just remain objective. Right? Don't fall into one of the partisan driven narratives that are, usually hyperbolic in some way. Just be objective, consider what you can prove, and don't get pulled into one or the other. Because my point is always, it's not just about Jewish people. As Adam Green and I talked about, the majority of Zionists today are Christians. And historically, it started as Christians. The point is, it's all about manipulation. And Jews and Christians and Muslims are all beginning to call it out today. That's what we need to consider. Now, it says, when you do your research, you will learn that the origin of this plan was discredited and that the alleged creditors have nothing to do with it. See, that's my point. It's very possible this could have been intentionally meant to be derisive, and that's always the point. Doesn't mean it's false. Well, it says, but who was the person providing the key evidence? It was Alan Dulles. See how this works? So this is something we've talked about a lot, where this is something that was seeded intentionally in order, or at least as he's framing it, in order to create the dichotomy they wanted. Now it says, the man who raised money from U.S. industrialists to fund Adolf Hitler, his Nazi party, and his war. The man who later became the director of the CIA during Kennedy and the head of the Warren Commission that investigated the Kennedy assassination. Why would anybody believe a man with such a questionable character? And realized Israel, in my opinion, and I think the facts are clear, are the reason Kennedy was assassinated. And I'll include that since we bring it up. Had a great interview with Corey Hughes about this and the conversation. I mean, it's undeniable. I mean, Kennedy was seeking to shut down or expose the Dimona nuclear reactor in Israel, which we all know about today, was seeking to have AIPAC register as a foreign agent, was talking about shattering the CIA. I mean, there's a lot of overlaps. Dulles being the CIA, I mean, the point being of his clear involvement with Zionism. I mean, it's all very clear how this ties back. Now, it's almost reductive to say it's only about Israel. It's so much bigger than that. Israel has just become a focal point for what they have been doing around the world in multiple countries. See what I'm saying? So it's not just about one religion or even just Israel itself, but there is a very obvious string that ties back to this because they have made their central location Israel in regard to Zionism. But this is an important interview that you should check out. And now, funny, I know you, Sam, I bet there's people laughing at me right now in the chat because I didn't just breeze through these points like I said I would, and I forgot. Now I'm going to try and do that again. So back to the point. It says, it says the protocols of the elders of Zion, I think I said it incorrectly in the beginning, have unquestionably borrowed ideas from several authors, but you can say that about most important writings throughout history. It was called a fabrication and is one of the first uses of the term conspiracy theory. See what I'm saying? Like, that's not even to say that it was a fabrication, but the ultimate point is to create that game where this is fake, so you can't say that, and it's a conspiracy theory, but the word conspiracy theory, the term, has been used to cover true things for a very long time. Now it says, why do Zionists have a massive overrepresentation in the media, politics, banking, world affairs? Now you'd be forgiven for thinking that's a similar point of saying Jews run the world. The reason is that's how you hide this reality. That's not just Jewish people. I just made that point. But it says, how did such a small community get to dominate all the centers of power and information? Why can Israel ignore UN resolutions, international law, and commit a genocide in Gaza to standing ovations in the U.S. Congress? Why is Israel acting like it is above the law, seemingly without any fear of consequences? Read some of the alleged Zionist world domination plan below and compare it with reality. Is all of this just a coincidence? Here's what it says. This is from the protocols. Our power will be more invincible than any other because it will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning can any longer undermine it. Goes on to say, quote, we shall absolutely control the media so that not a single announcement will ever reach the public without our control. In this way, we shall have a sure triumph over our opponents, for without the media, they are helpless. We will distract the brainless heads with vain conceptions, fantastic theories, rotten amusement, games, and filthy passions, so that they will be unable to use what intellects they have. They will never suspect that they have been stage managed by us. So thinking about the fantastic theories and vain conceptions. I mean, guys, this is the two-party illusion. Rotten amusement and games. We're talking about like bread and circuses down to like pornography and Pornhub and all these different things we've talked about. And it says, and I mean, look at somebody like Rabbi Shmuley out there pushing all sorts of weird sexual. I mean, again, you could make that about the fact that he's Jewish, but that I find that to be a byproduct, or rather a additional point. My point was, if he was a Christian priest doing that as a Zionist, I would have the same opinion. All right, and you could disagree with that, maybe you do, but I think that's the important focal point. He's obviously a rabid Zionist. Look at him handling RFK Jr. from the beginning. And it says, continuing, we shall create an economic crisis. Oh wait, no, it says we shall establish huge monopolies so that all will go to ruin when the political smash up comes. We're watching all of this. We must at all costs deprive them of their lands. We must lower wages and raise the price of all necessities of life. Now ask yourself why we can talk about the 10,000-year plan from China, which, fair point, is something to consider, and we don't talk about something like this. It says, we shall create an economic crisis, which will stop dealings in all exchanges and bring industry to a standstill. We shall throw into the streets whole mobs of workers simultaneously all over the world who will rush to loot property and delight to shed blood. Look at what we're talking about. Either the UK and the United States coming up to the election. It's what's happening. I mean, we're proving to you out there who are paying attention that these things are being driven and stoked by Israel. It says, in our government, besides ourselves, there must only be the mass of enslaved people. A few billionaires devoted entirely to us. Sounds familiar? Police and soldiers. To do this, we must create chaos and hostilities, and we must use all deceit, treachery, and falseness possible. Our greatest weapon is the media. Again, the main point here, let me finish it actually. It says, we shall establish one king over all of earth who will annihilate all causes of discord, such as borders, nationalities, religion, state debts, etc., and get peace and quiet, which cannot be secured in any other way. Sort of like the peace through strength, or chaos, order out of chaos. To attain our ends, we must foment trouble in all countries, utterly exhaust all of humanity with hatred, struggle, envies, torture, starvation, and diseases, so that the people will be forced to take refuge in our complete sovereignty. Sounds sort of like the New World Order dynamic, right? And it's not just about Jewish people and even Zionism, guys. We've seen the complicity grow. Quote, our MasterCard has been and is and shall be the destruction of all privileges, on the ruins of which we shall set up our absolute autocracy. Please, he says, this is Kim.com, be mindful that most pro-Israel comments on social media are generated by the largest bot network in the world, not real people. And yeah, who drove that on? By and large, Twitter and Elon have allowed the CHEQ company to overtake this under the guise of fighting bots. And we all see it playing out. So my point at the beginning about not going into this, essentially, or rather not highlighting the protocols in the past, but I've pointed to them, is because of the same point I've always made, it the way that's used to downplay real things. But my point is always, if that was the only thing we had, it probably would have been talked about more in the show. But my point is, I felt it was always more important to highlight what they're currently doing, whether as Christian Zionists or Jewish Zionists or whatever else, because you can prove it. Here they are influencing policy. Here they are doing all these crimes. And the point then is that hopefully people can retroactively consider that, well, look, that is obviously provably happening, right? So that's, I think, the bigger point, but I'm glad he highlighted this. Include that as well. Now, this is the image I used today. Obviously, artificial intelligence. I mean, what's funny about it is that the people don't even look like them. A lot of these artificially intelligent, the AI images out there right now of like Trump and Kamala, they don't even look like them, really. That doesn't even look like Bibi Netanyahu, but you clearly get the point. And so my point going forward on the next section here is that this is obvious, guys. In my opinion, it is self-evident. We're watching people who are all bowing down to this other entity while pretending the other one is somehow the anti-Israel or anti-Semitic, or, I mean, we literally went through an entire section where both Israel and the left administration were claiming that Trump and all the Republicans were anti-Semitic. There was a whole moment there where they were calling them all anti-Semitic. They were saying Trump was anti-Semitic. Except this was during Trump's administration, and he was blind, and this was the left calling him anti-Semitic. And they're all blindly adherent in our political sphere to Israel. And they're all battling for who is more adherent, and the one that's not gets called the anti-Semite. It's pathetic. And right now they're going crazy. Everything Kamala does is somehow now communism, and everything Trump does is, I mean, from their ends, Nazis. It's all hyperbolic nonsense. The point is that what they're both doing as the government is authoritarian control to keep you in the position you're already in. Communism, democracy, Nazism, they're all governments control that and some already set up, collect at the top, others that will evenly collect at the top regardless. The point is that to make it about one or the other, as I've said many times, is just childish. This game they play, like I'll show you in a minute, a post about why is Venezuela destroyed? And communism, of course. It's just such a simple, willfully ignorant reduction. Despite the fact that both Bolton and Abrams and Trump and everybody else has admitted that their sanctions caused the caravan, caused the destabilization, caused the starvation. They're on the record saying that and saying this will drive them to do what we want. And then later we just go, oh, guess it was communism. It's just so embarrassing. Now, I'm not supporting communism. I think that governments are the problem. And that's why we tend to not get the pushback from them, is because you can't pretend I'm supporting when I think all of them are the problem. That's why people who are not in the two-party illusion are the ones that are reaching people right now, because it's not this childish binary one side and ignore everything else dynamic, which is constant right now. So keeping this in mind, let's talk about the conversation of how both sides, more so the right in this moment, are being played by this two-party illusion that is being stoked by the very people we're talking about. Now, this is a post that goes back to 2023. This is OAN News from 2023, November 1st, right after October 7th, less than a month. And here's what it says. Radical left weaponizes the ADL against conservatives. Isn't that interesting? So right now, less than a year later, we are watching them say that the ADL is being weaponized against the left, right? We're watching Trump and the rest of them stand up and speak directly to all of the Israeli apparatus, the ADL, AIPAC, Miriam Adelson, and they're all, yay, Trump, we want Trump's the one, right? Because he's blindly Zionist. And I'll play these clips for you again. I have to. I make sure people don't miss this. And he's the one telling you all the radical left or anti-Semites, and we can't allow that. And I'll say it again. Don't miss the fact that while he's saying that all the radical left and all the AOCs and all of them, they're all radical and all super. And it's not just AOC and they're +3 or whatever he calls them. He's saying that the radical left, all of them are the problem, right? Or just the left in general. And if you listen to him, he's speaking about the left. Then you'll find out that AIPAC has funded the vast majority of them, 97% of all of them, in fact. You want to work that problem out for me? So you're telling me that AIPAC is funding radical anti-Semites? Or are you just saying that because this is the paradigm dynamic, as Israel's funding all of them? You already get the point. So here's OAN News showing you what we were saying 30 seconds ago. The Patriot Voice says, the other day I sat down with hard-hitting interview about my landmark defamation lawsuit against the ADL. So at this point, this is the right suing the ADL, claiming they were censoring conservative voices, even though 30 seconds later, it's pointing the other way. The point I'm trying to hopefully that you see is that it's an oscillating dynamic. It's whoever they need to threaten to get them in line in a moment based on whatever important thing is going on. And so right now, it's very obvious the left is more resistant to what's going on, more so calling out the genocide. But if you go back just to October 7th and November 1st, 2023, it was different, shockingly, at that point, because we were just coming off of a different agenda where it was the reverse. You see this point? The point is that they're able to pull the strings, either financially or threaten, so whatever, blackmail, for everybody. And it works. So here they are in this point highlighting the ADL was, at least whether they were, I don't know how to read this, whether OAN is just genuinely calling this out, certainly possible. They had plenty of good work during COVID and other things like any platform can. Or this is them being driven to do this for some reason. You can decide, but it's interesting to see the difference, isn't it? It says, we discussed the danger of this organization, again, right now, which most of them are either silent about or supporting, because the right is supposed to be on the side of Israel right now, and they're the ones pushing back against the dangerous left, right? On a dime. It's so crazy to me. And it says, as they are actively training the FBI to go after Americans who speak out and our constitutional rights using hate speech. Yeah, right. Which right now is being aimed at people that are anti-Semites. So it's okay to censor hate speech on Twitter as long as it's against Israel. So you do support censoring hate speech on the right as long as it's against the people you don't like. That's otherwise known as being hypocrites. It's not everybody. In fact, I believe most conservatives and liberals are starting to feel uncomfortable, see through this. I believe that. I'm hoping a lot of them are listening. My point is, I'm the one over here going, pay attention. You're being played. I'm on your side. I'm trying to get you to recognize that they're trying to manipulate you. And I'm talking about your party. The FBI will warn us about how Hamas and Hezbollah are coming over our border indiscriminately, but the reality is they couldn't care less. So again, that's a self-serving narrative. I mean, I think the FBI is serving your government, both sides of it, and we'll see this as it oscillates back and forth depending on what point we're dealing with. The point is right now, I mean, I don't want to get too abstract. The bottom line is if they're saying this, then you can pretend they don't care, but maybe they're saying it because the agenda is to get you to worry about it. That's what I see it as. They want you to think, oh my God, Hamas is going to come to the southern border because getting a biometric wall, which weirdly they all agree on now, was always the point. That's how that works. It condenses it down, right? It distills it down to the one main point they want to accomplish and weirdly enough, the left and right both agree, but they don't even admit they agree. Like we're seeing right now, where they both support Israel, but they're both fighting to show how the other one's less supporting of Israel. See, it's always the same game. And I think we'll see this a lot where you see them end up where they don't want to admit that they're essentially on the same side. They just end up showing the small deviation as this huge gap. When in reality, they're over there on the one side and the rest of us are going, you guys are ridiculous. But let me just play this clip really quickly. I'll just the opening really, to show you how they're framing this.
Israel has waged a war so brutal.
Did I miss one? Hold on. Let me see if I had that out of order. Oh, I did. I guess I missed that. Well, let me play this clip just because I think it's important for you to see. Let me just play the beginning of it. I mean, I already kind of mentally went past that. I've been talking about other things. But it was a clip from the conversation of Israel and the ongoing genocide.
So devastating that is now being seen as one of the bloodiest conflicts of the 21st century. A war that's wiped out 2% of Gaza's entire population. That is more than 40,000 Palestinians killed since the war began in October last year. And the UN says that's just an estimate given the number of people still unaccounted for. Israel has turned Gaza into what's been called a graveyard for children. Nearly 16,500 have been killed. More than 10,000 people are missing. Most are believed to be buried in the ruins of their homes and neighborhoods. And despite that staggering toll, Israel's assault on Gaza continues. Yeah, this was the scene in Khan Yunis where families were seen trying to escape Israeli attacks. Parents carried their children in their arms as they ran for shelter. And Gaza's largest refugee camp has once again come under Israeli fire. At least 7 people are killed in Jabalia. One of the buildings bombed was the home of paramedic Abdul Qadir, who had to recover the bodies of his own family. Most of them were killed in the Israeli strike, but he was able to pull his niece from the rubble and rush her to his waiting ambulance. Israel has killed more than 500 healthcare workers since the war began.
God, I mean, it's just so unbelievable. So sorry that was disjointed. So obviously the point is that that's still happening, right? And I mean, they're targeting their workers and their families. That couldn't be more clear. And anybody that's been watching and following along can see that. It's unbelievably obvious. Now, this clip is of OAN, back to this, discussing, weirdly enough, the ADL targeting conservatives. And really, my point is always to bring it back is they're targeting literally anybody. They will target and threaten and call out an anti-Semite as anybody who is barely deviating from the blind support for Israel, which they all have.
frequent targets of the radical left, and now the Anti-Defamation League is being weaponized to blacklist anyone who does not promote their far-left agenda.
Okay, so easily you can see how this is slanted in their partisan view. So now you're telling me the ADL is going after anyone who doesn't support their far-left agenda? Okay, so then why are they then going after the left right now? Which they are. Now, of course, like I said before, they probably just easily frame it as, well, they're pretending to for their agenda, which I guess is certainly possible, but we're watching them. I mean, aggressively through the ADL, but also AIPAC, a separate organization, also just another instrument of Israel. Very easy to prove. Goes back to an instrument that was founded in Israel, created through Israel, and then the name was changed because they didn't want you to see that it was Israel. They pretend it's an American entity. I mean, you can read this on Wikipedia for crying out loud. The ADL being an Israeli spy organization. I mean, that's James Lee interview we just had. It's very clear. So my point is, how do you make sense of that if they are going after the left right now in very aggressive ways? In fact, ADL and AIPAC trying to fund people to remove those people from positions in the government. I mean, a few months later, and the whole narrative flips. How do we not see that? It's because, like I said, they're going after anybody. And right now, things have oscillated. They've shifted in a different direction.
Here's One America's Pearson Sharp.
The radical left's weaponization of the media against the right shows no signs of stopping and is actually growing by the day. The left basically has a total monopoly of the airwaves and online media, and they wield that influence to deadly effect.
Now, the bottom line is obvious that anybody can see a liberal slant to the most of the media. But frankly, I find that to be pretty much by design. I could be wrong. But this idea that there's somehow it's very clear to me that this has always been a tool that's been used. Because if you see it like I do, and of course I could be wrong, but I think it's very obvious that this is not a left-right divide. It's about keeping you divided. Like the classic saying, it's just two wings on the same bird. That ultimately, if you end up doing that, you don't really see that the bird is not on your side. It's not flying in the direction that you want. At the end of the day, that's what that maintains. Now, and if you can see that, or at least stand back and look through that lens for a moment, you see that everything kind of falls into place. And I think that's the bigger point. Now, just for time, I'm going to leave that there. You can watch this if you want. It's all exactly like it goes on from there and exactly the way you'd imagine. And here's the interview with James Lee, the true nature of the ADL and how it spies on Americans for Israel. He does a great job in this. I think it's only 22-minute mini doc, and he breaks it down really well. We had a great discussion. Now, here's Wall Street Silver basically breaking. I've never even heard her say that, so I can't even confirm that's really what she says. It probably is, but who knows? There's a lot of misinformation flying around, and that's not some conspiracy theory or not some anti-right versus left kind of game. It just, there are people misinforming, which, by the way, I protect their right to do that as free speech. But he says, strength through joy. It's some kind of Kamala slogan. I mean, let me know if the chat that's even real. It probably is. It sounds like something stupid she would say. It's just it's a change of peace through strength through joy. It's just so stupid. But the point is, he says, I knew this clip says, I knew Kamala strength through joy slogan sounded familiar. And apparently they're claiming it was a German operated leisure organization in Nazi Germany, which, by the way, does not therefore mean it was Nazi. Just like there's plenty of things that exist that are not Zionist, even though they're in Israel or the United States. Or at this point in time, there were Germans that did not believe in the Nazi, it's the same thing. So I think it's fun. I kind of find it hard to believe that it very well may be some kind of Nazi program, but that strength through joy doesn't sound much like what you'd expect. But that's not the point. Just take at face value that this is what it is. It says it was a part of the German Labor Front, the National Labor Organization at that time. So clearly they would read that and probably is more of a socialist, communist kind of mindset. The point is it, okay, so you're suggesting the whole thing, she's Nazi, right? Okay, so I knew it sounded familiar. Kamal's a Nazi, apparently, or at least more adherent to sort of like a Nazi ideology or communist, whatever. And I just simply made this little thing and I just said, the partisan dance gets so tiresome. The whole Spider-Man pointing at each other and I put Nazi symbols on their face. So what's funny, to me anyway, is that it's just so it's just ridiculous how one can call the other a Nazi and the other can call the other a Nazi back, or at least insinuate. And we can't stand back and go, why is this happening? Like, why is the whole Nazi point such a focal point for whatever you want to call the bad guy? Well, maybe it's because we're being influenced on both sides through an entity that has built its entire ideology, its entire existence around the lies about how they pushed back against the Nazi organization, when in reality, they worked with it. And that's Zionism for you. And if you don't know that, I highly recommend you listen to this show where we break that down. And again, the only reason you might not have heard this before is because it's been protected by the screams and the shrill allegations of the anti-Semitism, which does exist, but it's verifiable. It's literally verifiable in documents, in their own statements, in Wikipedia or UN documentation. The idea that during this time frame, the Zionist organizations were aligning themselves with Nazi Germany. Dan Cohen has covered this. During the final solution, they were working with Nazis. It's in Wikipedia, for crying out loud. So how are we going to pretend? And this is what's causing a lot of contention. Like people like Candace Owens, for example, are out there pointing this out, and she's getting attacked for it because you're not supposed to say that. But the reality is easily provable. You can't pretend like you built this to stand against Nazi Germany when you were with them while you pushed this together. It's insulting to people. And if you just look into it, you'll find that out. It's not about Jewish people or anything other than Zionism using all of them. So what's crazy, my point here, is that if you're saying you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, I think we need to stand back and see the point I'm trying to make, that this is Zionism through Israel manipulating both sides of this false paradigm to do that, to get us going, you are, no, you are, no, you are, when in reality, it's both your government and the one influencing them that are pulling those strings, making you point at each other. I just can't stop seeing how obvious this is. Now, here's the clip I played, or to start. Netanyahu, this is one of, I think, at least two, I think maybe three, of him on the record, a leaked video, basically saying, don't worry about them. We can easily manipulate the United States. And how do you think he can do that? Through these parties. For the podcast, they're talking about attacking the Palestinians, right? Just in basically describing a war crime. Attack, collective punishment, attacking them so hard that they just don't want to fight back. Like he's talking about civilians, by the way. And I don't need to go into that. I've already made this clear. The history is undeniable. The information around it is so shockingly obvious. It's the point he makes next. Right. Okay. So because he just listed off a terrorist attack, she goes, well, hold on. But then the world will say that we're the aggressors, right? Because they are. He says they can say whatever they want. Aren't you afraid they'll say, Bibi? Netanyahu, they call him. And here's the important part. He says, especially today with the U.S., I know how they are. America is something that you can easily maneuver. Feel free to be insulted, either side of the paradigm, and move in the right direction. He says, and even if they say something, 80% of Americans support us. Now, that's rapidly changed now. He says, it's absurd. He's literally talking about using the two-party paradigm to drive you, to keep you stuck in the mud, to keep you in a position where you can easily be manipulated, just like that Spider-Man cartoon. He says, look, I wasn't afraid to maneuver the Clinton administration. I wasn't afraid to confront Clinton. I wasn't afraid to go against the UN. What happened with the Oslo Accords? He says, the Accords, which were ratified by Parliament, I was asked before the 1996 elections, will you fulfill them? I said, yes, subject to reciprocity and minimizing pullouts. I gave my own interpretation to the agreement in such a way that will allow me to stop the race back towards the 77. So basically, I made sure that I put in the agreement that there were exactly his words. I gave my own interpretation in such a way that it will allow him to stop the 67 borders. That's what it says. Oh, damn it! And he's been public about this since this. As people have stated as putting so many poison pills in the agreement that he knew that they would not agree to it. And if they did, he would be able to stop it. Now I'll leave it there because the main point is obvious, right? So clearly, they're telling you explicitly, we don't care what they say because we can easily maneuver them. And it's absurd because they all support us. Please be insulted by that. Please be upset about the fact that that government is telling you how easy you are to manipulate. Now, let me highlight how I think this is happening again. So here's a point going back to January 6th, which I think is a good point to start. This is new, though. This is from August 17th, but it's saying new video, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure we've seen this video before, appears to show D.C. police planting January 6th pipe bombs. Now, I'm almost certain that we've played this clip on the show before, but, that's how this tends to go. Breaking, the thing that a lot of real independent media played a long time ago. But the video all it shows you is the cop car and a guy get out of the cop car. And then you don't get to see this in action, but it shows it as the side of the video where you can't see. And it shows the guy walk over there, the cop car parked, then he walks back in the car right there. And then later there's a pipe bomb found right there. So my point is, whatever you think about whether this was police involved or not, the point is about how these things are manufactured. And I think it's undeniable. Like, the evidence is on the surface that January 6th was a clear operation. There's plenty of people that didn't know that and that were being used, taken advantage of, acting of their own accord. And you can decide which ones and where. My point is, it's undeniable the amount of evidence that shows this was pushed, driven, allowed, stoked, and with Israel as well, with Ukraine elements as well. I've gone over all of this. So when it says this planting January 6th pipe bomb, now a lot of people are going to say, okay, that's the FBI or that's the side trying to plant it and frame the right. Now, yeah, that's one way you could look at it. Or it's about trying to drive the right side of the conversation, who was more of a problem than the larger agenda in this moment, into a position where they could be suppressed, where they could be shut down and censored. Yes, but the game is not about left versus right. It's about your government in collusion with other governments shutting down whoever is the current problem in the dynamic. And a lot of your politicians are very aware of this. So going to this point from today, it's the same kind of dynamic. I just saw this posted. Chicago businesses are boarding up due to reports of hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators, which, by the way, I don't know why that would happen, seeing as how the only example I've ever so far seen of explicit violence to these buildings during these Palestinian protests have come when Zionists come in and start smashing things up. That's not to say that they can't have examples of violence. Anybody can. But again, it matters that you can prove it or not, right? And so what the evidence we've had so far have continued to show these screeching lies that come out to get disproven as, oh, there's the Zionists doing it again and pretending to be somebody else. But let's not forget, during the Black Lives Matter riots and everything else, there was explicit, overlap this with a second. Overlap this with that in a second. The point being that clearly either side of this can be used, manipulated, driven, and I think it's the same dynamic. There's plenty of people that were involved in this that I think in any element we're looking back through time that didn't know they were there they weren't part of a riot. They were there because they thought they were fighting racism. They thought they were fighting for freedom, whatever. Just like January 6th and fighting against the illegal stealing of the election or whatever else. There were people there that were in the right that were there deliberately to stoke these problems, and there were plenty that were not. Until we can actually see that and stop just going the left or the right and everybody against each other, because that's what they want from you, we'll always be stuck here. So here we have them boarding these things up already for the DNC. And it says, at this point, my point is, yet again, I see the right being driven into a position where they're going to use this against you. And it says the business has already predicted the level of destruction the demonstrators will cause. Yet the city still issued permits to these violent groups. So he, of course, is doing exactly what I'm going to say. And I simply said, you got to love this weak efforts. As always, this very preemptive action itself will later, or as he's doing right now, be pointed at as evidence of their violence. So it's sort of like when that woman, I think it was around the Olympics, was the Zionist, the Israeli, was protected. She had to have bodyguards and she had to wear a wig. And it was like, okay, well, what happened? Oh, nothing happened yet. But she had to, because if she didn't, they were going to attack her. Says who? Says the Israeli government, and the interest of making you think that Jews are under attack. Okay, well, it didn't happen. And by all accounts, there was no attack or no action in that way. Even in regard to the Palestinian protests, the police proved that. The lies of the Jews should be killed. Nope, they lied about that. The woman got poked in the eye with a flag. Nope, they lied about that over and over and over. So the bottom line of saying that because she wore a wig and because that means they're violent, you don't get to make the action and then say that retroactively proves that they were going to be violent. That's sort of like a preemptive self-defense kind of game. Well, they're known for that, aren't they? So in this case, they're boarding it up because they claim they're violent. Well, they haven't shown to be violent. You can't point at your preemptive action as evidence that they're about to be violent, but that's what he does. They gave him permits anyway. Look, we'd boarded up. And it's so, I don't know if they even recognize how dumb this is, that they would point at what they did ahead of time as evidence that they did it. It's just so stupid. But overall, what's this going to do? It's going to create the the picture that this is going to be violent, right? And so we have them boarding this up under the idea that, look, they're going to cause this violence. And the point is, this happens on both sides of this dynamic. And he sends this and says, did I send you this? This is Casey Wright, showing you how the BML riots, 2020, and we've shown you this before. They left these pallets of bricks, or at least that's what I believe as well. But I didn't see any provable evidence that tied it back to these being put there, or that when they got kind of cited for it, they said it was for construction or whatever else. But I also agree with that. I think this was obvious being set up because they want you to take the bait. That's how this works. Just like on this, they want them to take the bait so they can claim, right, that they're racist. Because again, it's a both sides dynamic, but right now aimed more at the left or at the right. But he's saying prior to the DNC convention, they're boarding up the buildings. What's the difference? I think it's about clearly projecting right now they want you to look through the paradigm lens the way they want you to see it for what's most advantageous for what they're trying to accomplish. And as always, anybody against Israel, which is also an overlapping point, is supposed to be seen as racist. But I think what's important to see through this is we're seeing this rise back up again. That's why I'm just including that. But again, we have, and now the point we're going to shift into here is that just like last show we discussed, right now with Twitter and Elon and the right conversation, he's like the Pied Piper of exactly what they said you would be. He's literally creating what they accused people in general of, but more so the right, of being, and is now artificially propping up all of the ones that are taking that bait or don't care or don't know any better and going, look at all these people are changing the media. And they're going, well, look, you guys are all, because they are. I can prove to you, most of them are sharing some of the most ignorantly false information, like willfully deceptive, wrong, lying, fake images. Okay. So I still will support your right to do that because that's free speech. But my point is not about whether they're allowed to do it or the consequences of, or rather the reaction of the government, but the people like him who are utilizing this through as a government contractor or asset, as I would see it, driving this to be the thing they want to be able to justify their action, which even then still wouldn't be justified in my mind. But how do we not see how this is being artificially driven in hopes that everybody falls in line? But I think most people are seeing this. I see more conservatives at this point calling out Elon Musk than I ever have before. But here's one of these accounts. I mean, therefore I am very right, very supportive of Elon. One of the ones that he constantly rises up with his one-word responses. And it says, breaking, a source from the Chicago Police Department has confirmed the appearance of pallets of bricks near locations designated for DNC protests. The bricks have been removed. Now, okay, so if this was the case, which I do think is part of what we're seeing, that would mean, in my mind, that they would do this so in hopes that you would take that bait. So at the very least, maybe he's calling this out in that way, but I don't know. The problem, though, not because of the fact check on Twitter, but because you can easily prove it, that's from 2020. Here's an article from 2020, from back then, showing you the bricks. Right there. Okay, so here's the problem. He says, a source from Chicago police. So that means, one, that's not true. So he was told that. So this account didn't check that from the source. Whoever gave it to him said that to him. And so then he repeated that. So remember that when you're looking at things they're posting, that they're sharing things without any due diligence whatsoever because it suits the interest of the narrative, and has confirmed, they say, the appearance of these pallets. So who confirmed what to whom? See my point? And so what all this comes back to, as we'll go to again in a minute, is that they're now trying to turn Twitter itself into some kind of a news organization, or at least the perception they're in, when the reality is these are just other people on Twitter sharing things from elsewhere. So the source wouldn't be Twitter. The source would be wherever they got that from. So now pretending this is something, source, X, Twitter, therefore I am. That's not even accurate. We don't know the source because he didn't tell you. This only says the same thing. Nope, it's a photo from 2020. So we have to be, so what else would you call that but misinformation? And again, I protect his right to do, or I will protect his right to do that, because he could have just been wrong, right? And we have that right, or to lie, frankly. But nonetheless, he was wrong. And so when Elon shares this, which has been, same thing, circulates around the internet, he's rising up what I think are designed misinformation, whether this guy knows it or not. You're being played. And then they turn around and go, look at that. They're all misinforming. We need to shut down people like me or other people out there, to not use myself as an example, that are out there doing objective work, even if they occasionally might be wrong, doing the nonpartisan objective research that is waking people up to the real picture. You bury that when you do this. I think that's what's happening. Now, this goes back to January 6th, as we were saying before. I've covered this a lot. This is from 2022. January 6th, the failed false flag meant to blame Russia and you, largely Republicans at this point, using CIA-grown Azov battalion. Right. If anybody's still pretending like the Ukrainian neo-Nazis are not neo-Nazis, I mean, I don't know what kind of stupidity I've got a vaccine to sell you, right? I mean, it's embarrassing to not be able to see how shockingly obvious this was and prove that this ties right back to people in Israel supporting them and the United States supporting them, which I've shown many times. I thought I had that up, actually. I guess not. Oh, wait. Oh, that's right. I'll come back around to this as well through the point about the COVID-19 injection point. But just the point in general is that here's Haaretz, rights groups demand Israel stop arming neo-Nazis. Again, back to the point about working with the Nazis and Zionism's origin. Well, it's not that confusing if you understand what Zionism is. And a lot of the Jews in this country who may identify with this don't know that this is the true origin or know this is what Zionism is. And that's why they're misinformed as well. They are supporting the worst of the worst, just like the U.S. government is. So in this point, the reality is that this was manufactured to trap you, whether you want the vanilla ISIS agenda or whatever else we were talking about, and it's still ongoing. It's being driven by, at least in some part, Israel. This was the same point. It was always a very clear government operation. This is the guy from the Azov movement, which we've proven. It's very public. Sergei Binyan, I believe. And he's on the record in this very show. You can watch it, where he's standing next to Jake Chansley in this video, or the show, the clip picture. And on video, he's saying, go, let's do it. Go in the Capitol. All in Russian as a Ukrainian. Well, which is certainly possible, but the point is you later find out this was all part of an agenda to drive this in and pretend like Russia was the one causing neo-Nazis and was destabilizing the country and achieving Israel's goal and blaming Russia, which is all part of this game, while they're funding the neo-Nazis that do this. And this is the Antifa-related guy that was out there caught saying, we got them, we tricked them. All part of it. Right, so we can clearly see that this is part of it. We also have the reality that the Rise Above movement in Charlottesville, which was the origin point of a lot of this conversation, is the U.S. arm of the Azov movement, which I talk about here. Directly in one of the experts with Newsweek literally point this out. The movement's gone international. The Rise Above movement in the United States is their international arm. So we see Israel funding them. We see CIA funding them, which is also the point. Wherever that was, maybe I didn't include it. There it is. Operation Aerodynamic. And then we see their funded entity act out in a way that they can use to justify shutting down and censoring. And so that's Israel and your government censoring. It's not the left doing that. It is your government. It's the same point. The Patriot Front, January 6th, the vanilla ISIS PSYOP. Now, my point is this is the same thing happening again. And there's not only ever just one agenda going on. This is just what I'm highlighting today. There's plenty of agendas being played against the left, like we just showed you. Attacking them for saying things. It's always coming from a lens of you're not allowed to say that because you're racist or you're saying the wrong thing. At the end of the day, it's happening to all of them. It needs to show you that it's not coming from the other side of your government. It's just your government acquiescing to foreign interests. Now, for the interest of time, I'm going to skip what I was going to go into next. And I'm going to go through this in a near show. It's important to me. But I was going to break down multiple articles from the People's Voice that are deliberately misinforming you. And my point here to show you this stuff is ultimately to highlight the fact that I'm of the mind that this person, Sean in particular, but the major platform, is one of the things we're talking about. I mean, I guess I can quickly do it. I'm going to come back to it. But one of these this one simply says WHO orders governments to prepare for mega lockdowns. It's not true. In no way am I trying to say that they're not planning lockdowns or they're not, look, Taylor Swift's worshiping Satan, apparently. It's certainly possible. But if you look at this content, it's embarrassingly stupid. It's lowbrow, lowest common denominator. And it's almost always, and this is the point, taking legitimate concerns or even provable things and then adding a whole deceptive layer to it. Like in this case, if they're out there discussing the possibility of lockdowns for what might happen in the future, and they come out and say they just ordered them to get mega lockdowns, what that does is causes people that want to believe they just are out there doing the right thing or lying for their truth, and they're okay with that, attacking those of you that come out and go, hold on. No, first of all, the word or the term mega lockdowns was never quoted. Nobody ever said that. That's directly from what they're pushing. And so what they're saying is they ordered them to do it. So there's no order that made that happen. There's no stated term of mega lockdowns. So they're lying to you deliberately on the back of a real thing, which causes people to dismiss the real thing and causes people to push the lie. From either side of the dynamic, if you're stuck in it, you're being manipulated. I believe this is a clear play against the right predominantly. These are, I think, completely, this is my opinion. I don't know whether this person's doing this because they're just trying to manipulate you for clicks and money, or because it's being driven that way, or they're just too stupid to know they're lying to you. At the end of the day, what seems most likely is this conversation today. This is another element of the left-right paradigm, where this person is being driven forward, whether by Israel or by somebody else or by if you want to make it a left-right thing from the left, to manipulate the right. And I think it's very obvious because most of these things are aimed at conversations like we'll show you that are very real. This one, and here, this guy, Luther Cyrus, sharing this. Marin County defies CDC vaccine schedule. Reports record-breaking decline in autism rates. Well, the decline is real. The point is that this is not true, that the county defies the schedule. That's certainly possible. And if you actually look at the actual place it comes from, which is here, or the video that they even embed, which is this is Toby Rogers talking about this. Listen to him for yourself. And by the way, this sudden and unexpected, I think, is just an extension of whether it's died suddenly or this group as well, which I don't trust any of them. I think they're lying to you a lot, using true things, by the way, to bury the reality. I think that's what it's about. The point here is that if you read into this and you listen to what they talk about, or look at the study itself, in nowhere does it suggest, and I'll just read this guy's quote to speed up the time, of this one here. He says, Dr. Saeed, who's done good work around COVID, says probably true, which is the kind of the way I'm coming from, right? Well, probably. But what about the fact that there is no evidence or proof in this article whatsoever, or the study that shows the lower vaccination rates in Marin County, or even a more spread out vaccine schedule, which is probably what actually did, since it's impossible to find any pediatrician in the entire state of California to sign a vaccine exemption, which is true. So the bottom line is, yes, we saw a decline. And what Toby Rogers points out is that you saw people during lockdowns and different things that had a decline in the vaccines in general, or that you saw people that were more skeptical. And so there was a general decline in the country, mind you. And on top of that, in this one county, all they said was interesting that we see a decline in autism rates. And so that should be a story in and of itself, that by almost by accident, because of the lockdowns, they weren't able to get what they probably wanted to get. And at the end of the day, the point is that all we can prove is a lowering of autism rates and a nationwide lowering of these overall injections. That is a story by itself, and that we should go, oh my God, that almost proves that they're connected, right? But if you then claim, no, they deliberately chose to defy the schedule, and that's why what you're doing is adding a false layer to an important story. And that causes people that are being honest, who don't know otherwise, to mislead others and then get them doubted, or get people to doubt the real story. But it also creates a complete air of misinformation. This is, and of course, fact-checked by the People's Voice community. Guys, we're being played. I really hope people can see that. And the point here, this one is the article I wanted to show you. And this is another one. German police begin raiding homes of citizens who share non-mainstream content. Of course, it's a UK overlap. Very concerned about where this is going with them. The point is, if you actually read the article they're pointing to, and the actual link to the article and all the source material they include, that's not what it says. What it says is German police may soon be doing that. Oh, you find out that it's actually in the process of, hasn't even passed yet. Got it. Here, and this is one of the articles they include. They want to allow them to do this. And if you read it, it's draft legislation, which means it hasn't passed yet. Doesn't that matter to anybody? So my point is, yes, it's important to know it's happening, but not that it began happening. They did not begin raiding homes. And if you don't care about these obvious deceptions, then you don't care about the truth. You're in this because it's fun for you, or because you think you're trying to lie for your truth, which is just as bad. You're being used, and I'll show you what I mean. Or things like this. A union between child and adult is sacred under Sharia law. World Economic Forum, fake tweet. You'll find these fake tweets on almost every one of their graphics, lying to you. And they pretend like they're just trying to make a point. No, you're deceiving people. People believe these things. They look at it. They think that's real. This is the culprit right here. And let me show you something. This is an article written by The Standard. Now, I'm not trusting anything written by anybody, whether it be independent or corporate media, but these are quotes taken directly from him. I find this to be interesting. First of all, he's a former MTV producer. He also worked for BBC for a minute when he apparently tried to trap David Icke in some kind of a dynamic. And then the story goes that he ultimately shifted and said, whoa, hold on, you're being tricked, so let me work with you. And then he worked with him for a brief time until David Icke then realized he was a manipulator and pushed him out of the field. That's what happened. And now David Icke apparently doesn't like this guy. That seems a little bit suspicious to me. It seems like somebody who's trying to pretend to be what they want to work their way into people that are trying to inform you. That's what I would see it as. But here's the main point. He lives with Sinclair, his American husband. They signed the register in Camden at 1 minute past midnight on the day David Cameron. The main point is their apartment is filled with art. And I can't help but notice a Bernie Sanders bumper sticker too. Most of my friends, and I would say me too, are liberals. I'm not some member of the alt-right trying to stir up racial hatred or homophobia or anything. I'm just very open to ideas. Doesn't that seem interesting to you? So this is back in 2017. So now you've got this prominent website that shares almost constant misinformation that is aiming at the right from a self-professed liberal who, if you read through that, he suggests he doesn't like Trump either. Doesn't that seem like, even within the paradigm, that's exactly what you should be on guard for? Somebody who is mislead. I see this, and I could be wrong about this site being a part of it. Maybe he's just a liar. But overall, I see a larger operation where people are being played, aimed at the right more than ever right now, to turn you, or at least those willing to be played or not care, into what they said you were. Same thing aimed at the right during COVID, or the left during COVID. I mean, it's the same damn thing. Or rather, more so, which one was it? I mean, my point is, topics oscillate. It's not left or right when you stand back and look at the long-term picture. Oh, and that was the main point. So you can read this for yourself. Now, where are we at right now? Time. I do still have limited time. So I wanted to go into this as well. So this brings us back to the point. I want to play these clips from Israel and Trump. But so this Donald Trump, who's now posting on Twitter again, posted this. Just completely leaning in. You know, like, again, to be clear for those that didn't hear me in the beginning, I don't support communism or socialism or democracy or government in general. I'm very anti-government in general. Period. And I see all of them as just as problematic. I actually don't even, none of them seem like a positive step for me. That being said, this idea that you're pretending like she's communism and there's something else, they're all the same thing. And they're all authoritarian control structures to convince you that you're wanting their flavor versus this flavor. Coke and Pepsi. It's embarrassing. And I think most people are starting to see it, though. My point is, of course, this works for the leading right ideologues on the left-right paradigm. Hopefully the minority today of both sides, the conservatives and liberals of the world that are seeing through it all. But this is perfect because we got, their communism, so we are the good guy, right? Well, APAC Tracker just simply posted this picture, which I should use later. All these AI pictures going around of Trump speaking at a rally when it's all Israel flags in the background. Now, my point is not to say, he's bad versus she's good or whatever. They both blindly support Israel. They are both actively authoritarian. They're both guiding in the same damn policies and convincing and conducting the same damn wars. It's all these small differences we talk about. I'm not even going to get into whether I agree with her ridiculous statements about grocery stuff. It's all nonsense, guys. They all have the same ultimate end game. My point is to highlight the fact that all of them are playing you. All of these people are using the deceptions and the lies to drive you in a position where you're amenable to one side or the other of their false dichotomy for the interest of somebody else. Now, here's the same kind of point from before. I mentioned this. Simon Godek points this out, saying Venezuela holds the largest oil reserves in the world by far. Frankly, I think it's far more about the lithium today. But he says, so why is it such a poor country? Well, that's easy. The U.S. sanctions and destabilization, Israel destabilization. It's all very easy to prove and on the record. But of course, Elon says extreme socialism verging on communism has made the country that should be rich become poor. We're not going to get into the sanctions that are deliberately aimed at starving the country or the destruction of their oil, low interest loans for other countries that were also suffering, or just like with Libya, highest quality of life, free healthcare, free education, all the things that they desperately dislike because you claim that's socialism. The difference between the Venezuelan government and the U.S. government, it's a 13% difference on how much they control from the government. 13%. It's really stupid to pretend that 13% makes the difference between communism and democracy. And on top of that, the reality is about whether they nationalize the resources that then help the individuals. The rest of it is not not the government control. The point is that when you look at the U.S. government, what they do is take all of the wealth and distribute it amongst their oligarchy and then pretend like everything's a private market when it's not even the truth. We are constantly played, and anybody with a brain can see that. You can call it whatever you want. The point is that neither are what you're calling them. And the game here is that this is a classic tactic. And he has started tweeting about Venezuela on turbo right after Maduro got elected. Hadn't even said one thing about it before. Now I think it's about his interest, whether it's lithium or because he's just an asset of the government. But he says, you're right, Elon, which is, yeah, I'm sure you guys high-fived about this. That was clearly what you wanted from this. Did you know that Venezuela had 33 ministries and more than most countries in the world? All of this is, the reality is obvious. Sanctions. He simply says, I'm usually there with you, but none of BRICS countries sanctioned Venezuela. It's the U.S. sanctions. They're the only ones that truly matter in this conversation. The latter could be swimming in money, but governmental mismanagement, it's absurd. I can't believe anybody. Look, their actions are going to have an effect on the outcome. But before the U.S. started doing this, by and large, it was not the problem. It was not the case. And I've covered this for a very long time. As Mencho says, because of U.S. sanctions. Nice try. I mean, you could read, that's not just because they say that doesn't mean you should blindly assume that, but look, read, study, recognize that there's undeniable evidence, as I've played before, of Bolton, Abrams, everybody involved saying, we caused this, we did this. It's just like with Iran. We got people selling their organs for food. That's how a good regime change works. Rudy Giuliani famously said about Iran. And we're going to turn around and pretend like that's their own mismanagement. I mean, it really does take a special kind of willful ignorance to not see how obvious this is. As Sal Agris points out, and this is the ultimate larger point, whether it's ideology or government or ideologue, is a meme that says, hey, friend, politicians don't love you. You shouldn't love them. It's weird and embarrassing. Exactly. So on that note, let me see actually what else we had too. We'll come back to some of these points. Oh, I did want to get into all this. Let me play some of these clips and I'll see how much time I got left. Ian Smith says, why is it so difficult for so many mainstream conservatives to take an honest look at the American-Israeli relationship from a purely objective position? No emotion, no screeches of anti-Semitism, no generic Fox News talking points, no mention of the Holocaust. Just dollars and cents analysis and a look into the history of events like the USS Liberty, the Lavon affair, and the selling of state secrets to China and others, dancing Israelis, Mossad, CIA connections to terror cells, dual citizenship of dozens of high-level American politicians, Israel support for mass migration via NGOs into Western nations. Guys, it's all right there. I forgot how to say that now. The Samson option, the list goes on. For the party of self-proclaimed free thinkers and freedom fighters to not be able to see what's going on is alarming. Yeah, self-proclaimed is the point. He says this is made up of some of the same group of people that saw right through the COVID scam. Some of them pretended to, by the way, or aligned with the movement for this moment. But it says, but so many can't figure out the literal same scam being run with the Middle East, the military-industrial complex, for the second, third time in a generation. Again, that's true. Some people just can't see it because they've been engineered not to. But I think a lot of them, like the top 30 list will show you, just these are people that they're not out for, it's about a game. It's about political control. And the right took the stance against the COVID jab and so on, even though Trump completely still supports it, which blows my mind. He says, the same people who knew the BML was fake and orchestrated can't seem to connect the dots to the anti-Israel protesters being fake and orchestrated. Now, I don't agree with that in the sense that they're being fake and orchestrated. I believe that they're being used in the same way. He says both were designed to make the right outrage and both work. Now, this is guy, you could look at his work. He's very partisan. The point here is that this is from a very right-centric perspective, that everything out there is designed to trick the right. And that is part of what I'm saying, but it's not only thing. Both sides are being played. And in the case of the pro-Palestinian protesters, let's be clear, that was a worldwide momentum. It was not just left-right U.S. dynamics. And obviously, they were trying to use that, as I was showing you. They were trying to infiltrate it, like they did much easier, by the way, with January 6th and other things. But the point was, it was easy to prove that it was very organic, and it still is. That's one of the reasons they lost control of that. But either way, the point is, they did clearly try in both cases. And my point's the same. There's plenty of people in those BML protests for the same reason that weren't there. It wasn't every single person was there because they were ordered to be there. Some people just thought they were, and they were being played, fighting for what they believed in. It says, it seems as if the party in Trump supports something, then we all must go behind it, which is just crazy to me. That's the meme right there. It's embarrassing and weird. He says, and anyone who says otherwise is, I'm unfollowing, or you hate Jews. And it's really stupid. And it's like repeat of watching people ignore Trump pushing the vaccine. Yep. The party needs to be challenged, or none of will ever break the system of control. As long as its tentacles it lives in the Americans, forcing them into debt slavery, inflation of currency away, sending their young men to die in the desert, and more. I invite any pro-Israel conservative to look into this, and if you still think I'm wrong, let's do a live discussion on it. Now, I played these clips that I want you to see again. 2 minutes, 3 minutes long. It's important. If you haven't seen my last show, it's very important that you see this. These are clips of Donald Trump at his recent campaign event funded by Miriam Adelson, where he is telling you the quiet part out loud, explicitly. And I'll make these points as we go through it.
The power, Miriam, of this lobby, this powerful, and it was for good, not for bad, of being Jewish and of Israel. And unfortunately, they're not necessarily the same, because you have Jewish people living in New York who really don't support. You look at the New York Times, and they do not support Israel, and I don't think they support Jewish people. You want to know the truth. And you wonder.
So the first point is he clearly just said right there that not all Jewish people support Israel. And you're not supposed to say that. That's supposed to be racist. When we say that, we're called racist. So he tends to ramble and he loses him. I don't think he was supposed to say that. And pretty much along with everything else he said here. That's why he rerouted it back into, well, I don't think they even support Jews. Well, they are Jewish. Such a stupid thing to say.
I wonder where it all came from, but why did it come? And they have to get together. They have to be strong. Because it's never been under attack like this. It's never been under siege like this. But 15 years ago, it was the absolute most powerful. You couldn't have an AOC +3. They wouldn't have a chance of being elected.
Yep. Yeah. Did you hear that? He literally, and I'll play the other clip where he makes this clear. Congress used to control, or rather Israel used to control Congress, he says, rightly so. And says that, and I'll make that happen again. I'll play it for you. But his point here is to say they wouldn't have been elected if that was the case. Oh, okay, hold on. I thought it was about democracy. Isn't that the point? I thought it was about voting people in. No, it was Israel making sure they were allowed to or not. How do you pretend that's not alarming? Like anybody, conservative, or just aware that it's so shocking to me that anybody in any part of this discussion can't go, whoa, that's crazy, unless you think Israel should have that power. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here. And I'll come back to this. They play the old radio discussion, like months old, where he made this point. He said this many, many times.
The biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress.
And rightfully over Congress. How does that one thing alone not shake people out of their confidence? So we're to believe that Israel is supposed to have control over Congress? I mean, the whole point is there are Republicans out there that don't want to, they're pretending this isn't real because it shatters their perspective. And there are conservatives out there that are uncertain now, and rightly so. The good, you should be, because that's crazy. Then, and this is the largest point, there are the right ideologues, the people trapped in the paradigm that know this is not there, but just do it because they either are part of the Israel agenda, because they have a personal agenda, or because they don't care because they're making money. You know who I'm talking about. You out there listening who are conservative, or even if you're a Republican and you see this now and you change, call them out. Put this at the highest level of the conversation and say, time out. We can't go a step further if we're all pretending like we don't know this. We can't say that Israel can have control over our Congress and act like we're voting somebody into power here. That's so alarming to me that nobody wants to call this out. And I mean, that's what I'm trying to get people, whether conservative or liberal, not Democrat and Republican in the trapped two-party illusion system where it's all team sport politics, but the majority of people out there who do identify as one side or have values that you don't just shift because you want to change sides for your own interest. The real liberals and conservatives out there. I think you're the majority. And I know you're honest people. And I know that you would care about this. in any dynamic, whether it's Kamala or Trump or anybody who's proving to you that they have control. That should be something you call out. Make sure you call out the people that don't want to discuss this.
Israel was the most powerful lobby in the country 15 years ago. Today, between TLAV and AOC and all of these people, what they're doing, Israel, they don't have the backing that they once had.
You'll give it to them.
Yeah, I'm good.
Right. So we'll put this back in place. And as you just heard him say, they wouldn't have been elected if he would have had in place what he wanted to allow. So democracy, though, right? Let's keep pretending like we live in some kind of representative government.
Under attack like this. It's never been under siege like this. But 15 years ago, it was the absolute most powerful. You couldn't have an AOC +3. They wouldn't have a chance of being elected anywhere. And today you have AOC and some of these people, and they're pretty violent, and they hate Israel and they hate Jewish people.
Yeah. So now apparently they just hate Jewish people, which is not true. I mean, let's be clear. If nobody knows what their actual mindset is. So if Trump is saying this, my point is that there's no evidence that I can see that makes it evident that they just hate Jews. In fact, it's very obvious they're working alongside major Jewish groups to push back against Israel genocide. But of course, my point is that, I don't know, maybe they do secretly, but Trump doesn't know either is the point. He's pretending they do because it's working for this group he's talking to, a bunch of rabid Israeli Zionists.
And he can end up
And don't miss all the Israeli flags behind him on his campaign trail for an American president.
winning because you're going to have the president, okay? So
Yeah, you hear that? Don't worry, though, because you're going to have the president, Israeli Zionist, paying for everything. You're going to have the president. Just pretend like that's just something he accidentally said, right?
you're going to end up winning. But you do have people, and it's amazing. The radical Marxist left and the sympathizers.
You see, so he's not saying, the point is, he numerous times in this conversation addresses the left as the problem. So if that's the case, then why is Israel funding all of them? Because it's not about that. That's the way to manipulate the blind Republicans out there or conservatives that don't want to see the rest of this to think that supporting him is the right way to go. Right? That's it. Blinding yourself to everything else. Right? That we're fighting those radical lefties and help me. Trump is doing this with Israel. And then here's Israel funding those same radical lefties. Yeah, oops, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, let's stand back and realize how ridiculous that is. The reality is that they are funding everybody because Israel is absolutely influencing the policy in this country through people like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
Of the radical Islamic terror, who Democrats have imported from all over the world, have united around their hatred of America and their hatred for Israel. They have hatred.
And by the way, I disagree with almost all of what he's saying. I'm sure some of this exists, but let's be clear. Everything he's discussing is protected under your First Amendment. But apparently, all the people that are screaming about the Constitution and the left trying to destroy it don't care about that, though, because, we don't like those people.
Toxic poison of anti-Semitism now courses through the veins of radical Democrat.
Right. So like how you were just called anti-Semites, all Republicans 30 seconds ago, because that's what they were doing while Trump was in power before. Trump was an anti-Semite, you're all anti-Semites, and how the ADL was weaponized against conservatives because you're all, oh, wait a minute, how does that make sense? Maybe we should reflect on that.
Party. I mean, this is a radical group of people. I never thought
I guess the point I should include, which is the main point, which is that how do we not see that Trump is weaponizing speech the same way? How long until you're the one, once again, being called anti-Semite, which means they can then, deport you? Because there's plenty of conservatives out there that don't like what Israel's doing. In fact, don't think Israel should exist. Are you now going to vote for Trump and he'll deport you because you are against Israel? It doesn't matter. He's saying sympathizer. You have a right to sympathize with whoever you want. That's an internal process. You can sympathize with whoever you want. That's your right. But not in Trump's America. But the reality is not in this country, no matter who's in power, because ultimately it's somebody outside this country. I think that's very clear. It's not about Jews or anything other than the reality of Zionism having influence over policy, like it does in plenty of other countries too.
See that either. They have gone crazy. And instead of expunging this hatred, Kamala Harris is pandering to it. He wouldn't even meet Bibi.
Yeah, we literally just showed you many times in the past that they are all adherent to Israel, blindly, openly supporting them, all getting funding, all of them. And so that's my point. So now, because she's just a little bit less, right? She can see that her party is obviously against what's going on. And so she just didn't show up. Didn't say no. Didn't say, I condemn your genocide. No. Quietly still kept on page with them, but just didn't show up so she could pretend she didn't want to be with them. Or even the Venezuela point. They're all screaming about how she supports Maduro and fighting for communism. They are literally all supporting the same people. Left and right, Kamala and Trump, everybody are supporting the opposition candidate from Maduro. But let's just pretend, because it makes the narrative make more sense, that they're fighting each other. No, it's all in the interest of a foreign government and ultimately the one government that we have in this country. That's it. Here's the next one.
Kamala Harris will support unlimited migration from terrorist hotbeds into the United States. When I'm president, we will deport the foreign jihad sympathizers, and we will deport them very quickly. And
I mean, this idea that they're going to, look, I think all of your government has an interest in allowing what's happening, just like during all administrations, we see immigration continue. The point is that Israel, on the record, I've shown you many times, is explicitly driving this into reality. Like the guy we just pointed out, the conservatives, was calling this out. It's not hard to see, guys. Their own policy makes this clear. I was literally just playing that clip of one of the many rabbis that are saying this is the only way we're going to get the end times to come about. We got to flood these Western countries with immigrants. I mean, it's literally their policy. And so to stand back and make it only about one side or the other, when at the end of the day, they're both doing this to distill this down to the biometric wall conversation, we just got to see how we're being played. Trust me, I keep saying this, but my feeling is that most of you out there see this. I'm just trying to get you to reach the people at the top, or at least call them out if they're not on your side.
Hamas supporters will be gone.
Now, so bottom line, you can't support Hamas. Right. So if you were Israel, you wouldn't be able to be in this country because Israel funds Hamas. Oops. The point is, you're not allowed to have that opinion. You're not allowed to support this political group. Right? I mean, aren't they the ones that tell us they were the democratically elected government in 2006? So you're not allowed to support that government? Like, the point is, whatever you think about it, and I'm the first that's going to point out Israel funding them or creating them to become the group that was used to justify why you couldn't deal with Palestinians. So that's obvious because they wanted to be the group that they turned them into. But my bottom line point is that's still your prerogative. That's your right to support who you want. Trump is telling you you don't have that right when I'm president. Simple as that. And a lot of the Republicans out there are going to pretend that makes sense because we don't like Hamas and we think only lefties support or even though what we're talking about are people that support Palestine. See how convoluted it gets? But all it turns into is whoever's in power can aim that weapon at whoever they want. You're saying things that we pretend you're anti-Semitic, you're shut down. Even if it happens to be something that is calling out Trump, whatever it is. Or calling out the left. It is weaponization of speech. Isn't that what you all just got done telling me the left is trying to do? They're all doing it.
If you hate America, if you want to eliminate Israel, then we don't want you in our country. We really don't want you in our country.
There's a lot of, you got Jake Shields and a whole lot of very prominent Republicans out there that are absolutely calling out Israel. Well, I mean, a lot of them also call it Trump, which makes sense at this point, but he's literally telling you, we don't want you here, Americans who don't think what we think. That is dangerous rhetoric. I mean, we used to pretend we were a country that allowed all sorts of different opinions, and and we're being driven into the same kind of ideological bottleneck that Israel put as. I mean, what are we seeing? The mass promotion of raping people because they're not like us. We're being driven there right now.
I will ban refugee settlements from terror-infested areas like the Gaza Strip.
I am convinced what he just said right there was that we will ban Palestinians from having camps inside of Gaza. Now, you can pretend Trump supporters usually pretend he means whatever they want them to mean. The point, nobody in this conversation calls settlers refugees. Nobody. Because they don't. They see themselves as the rightful owners of this land, so they're not refugees. Nobody else is anywhere calling them refugees because they're from inter. So when he says refugee settlements, there's only one way to take that. Palestinians in Gaza. And he's telling you we won't allow them to have them there because, terrorists. So all he's doing is creating this narrative that's going to be used to justify removing all the Palestinians, which is what Israel wants. I could be wrong. I hope I am. But mark my words.
And we will arrest the pro-Hamas thugs who vandalize federal property and make really life very, very difficult.
So all he said right there, if you want to take it at face value, is we'll arrest people that break the law. Duh. But that's not what he means. He means we'll go after anybody supporting Palestine. And then, of course, when a Zionist breaks in and does something on a statue that we pretend was everybody there, we'll shut down the whole protest, because rights and Constitution and stuff.
Difficult in this country for a lot of people. I will put every single college president on notice.
Just in interest of time, I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted the main points to get out again. Watch these. Watch all of them. And then this one as well. Miriam Adelson speaks. And I mean, it just straight up, it's like everything else. Clear. Trump delivered. We gave him money. He gave us Jerusalem, Golan Heights, and pulled out of the Iran deal, all of which were illegal or unjustified. All of them. Illegal occupation. I mean, he didn't have the legal authority to do any of it, really, other than the deal, which, by the way, they just used against Iran the entire time. The point is, the whole point is from the very beginning, this was all manipulation. And the whole point was to manufacture the illusion that they were breaking the deal when they were not. But anyway, the point is that she's simply telling you, look, we control this. We got him. He delivered. He did what we wanted him to. This is somebody fighting for Israel interests. That's all this is. And it's never been more clear. That's what we're dealing with right now. And again, here's AIPAC. On August 24th, 2022, 97% of AIPAC-backed candidates have won their elections. We have helped defeat 12 candidates. Oh, I'm sorry. I used the wrong number before. That's 97% of the ones they backed. The last clip we have, I think it was something like 74% of every politician in Congress. And it's pretty damn close. It's left and right everywhere. Same point, though. Being pro-Israel is good for their policy. Yeah, you're right. Now, here is another same Ian Smith guy saying, can MAGA explain to me why we're flying Israeli flags on the campaign trail again? Again? I said, anyone? Now, a lot misunderstood what I was asking there. Obviously, I'd like to think it's clear that I'm aware of what's going on here. My point was, can MAGA explain? So I said, anyone out there in MAGA who wants to acknowledge why this is a problem, but I'm not seeing that. This person, who I thought was kidding, says, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. You can't win a city commissioner job if you openly criticize Israel, the Fed, farmer. Let's get real here. Oh, okay, so you're just going to lean into the game, right? So he did that last time and then maintained it all 4 years. For the long play for the next 4, we can't be this childish, guys. The bottom line is I don't even believe this person's real. Keep your friends close. Are we really still playing this game from QAnon? It's just mindlessly stupid. The game is you're working with the enemy. If you think this makes sense and that's somehow an outcome, like a long-term play, well, look what happened last time. You can't win a city commissioner job without Israel? Yes, that's our point. So your point is to just go with it? Because, let's get in power. Well, all that shows you is the same as the injection. All you care about is getting in power. Team sport politics. He won. We did it. But you bowed to the interest of Israel to do that. Let's pretend like you're going to change that in the process. It's not true. I said, that's perfect. Exactly like the Q broken logic. Or was that supposed to be a joke? I mean, it's mind-blowing. Bob Moran, from the cartoonist, very intelligent guy, called out Elon Musk. Elon played this game where he says, you watch the Hunger Games and you sided with the resistance. You watch the Matrix, you sided with the resistance. We've seen this circulating, right? Then it ends by saying, when it's fiction, you understand, yet you refuse to see when it's really when it's the reality you're living in. And I mean, everybody was like, are you really this tone deaf to your own support for genocide? I mean, really, man? Like, you're literally standing with those people. You're doing that right now with Israel. Like, it's just crazy. But he's just playing into the narrative that he's some kind of free speech savior fighting against the power as a technocrat billionaire, a military contractor tied in with I can't even finish the sentence. How stupid that is. But Bob points it out and says, you watch The Matrix and learned how AI blocked out the sun and started growing humans in vast fields to harvest their energy, yet you believe that this genocide-applauding champion of AI is on your side. Wow, I love that. And Nikki points this out. Here's a friend of Thiel in bed with the CIA who wants a technocracy in AI pre-crime systems. This is a class war, not a race war. Presumably Musk is being used to drive the serfs further for the transatlantic security elite. This is the idea we're talking about, right? If he's the Pied Piper to drive this into the position that's needed for the larger agenda, and they're playing the left-right paradigm like a fiddle. At least they're, to the paradigm. I'm of the mind that most people in this country are beginning to see through it. But let me see how much time we got here. I'm going to play this, actually. I think it'll be a good point to wrap with anyway, and I'll wrap it to go through the end. You guys have seen this clip, but I want to play at least some of it again. I think it's important.
It's important. I want to
I don't want to breeze over this. So there's a thing called Maine Corps, and this thing called Maine Corps, they've set. So Barack Obama repealed habeas corpus, just so you know. Right. So these all things go together. So what does that mean, Jimmy? So they don't even have to give you a trial. If they want to lock you up, they can just say you're a terrorist, and then they can have what they call indefinite detention, thanks to Barack Obama and the 2011 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1021.
But let's realize that whether it was Obama that was the selected puppet while that was happening, every administration since have left that there, which it's just as easy to remove these things. All right, so just consider that. Now, I know that he's pointing out because it's accurate, but a lot of times it's sort of like a nod to the right and the comment. We know it was Obama and the lefties, but the reality being it's just your government, and we need to start doing that. Your government did this to you. Yes, maybe it was one side. It was still your government as a whole who are actively in interest of war in Israel, almost entirely at the same, in line with those things, no matter what. And we're usually at war because of Israel. And so the point is that they've left it there because I think it's obviously part of the agenda.
Now, how this works with Maine Corps is explain to people again. You went a little fast. Explain to people again what Maine Corps is.
Maine Corps is a database that was created by the Iran-Contra people in the 1980s, but it still exists. And it contains names of Americans who are deemed quote unquote unfriendly by the national security state and could be rounded up or incarcerated during a national crisis. And
they actually said this. They actually said this.
It came up during the Iran-Contra hearings, and
so the point is that this could be whatever causes it, whatever side causes the outrage, whatever narrative happens. They stole this or they cheated that, and everyone starts going crazy. Well, guess this is how these things get initiated. And the point is, as she'll get to, this is aimed predominantly at gun-owning constitutionalists. And it's being driven by Thiel and Vance and Trump and Elon and this kind of element that we're seeing. Palantir, which we'll get to.
Hearings were shut down when Senator Jack Brooks tried to ask a question about it. I put the video
is that
in the
what
article.
that was?
Yes.
Oh, you've seen that clip where the Hawaiian guy in Congress basically says, we'd like to request that you don't talk about this for national security. They're highlighting that exactly what she's discussing, which still exists to this day.
I saw. So that was this Daniel Inouye shut that down. The senator from Hawaii. He shut that down. Okay, so now
there was a Miami Herald report about it, actually, because it involved Cheney and Rumsfeld as well, even though they weren't officially in the Reagan administration.
So they're collecting names of Americans, and I'm sure someone like me would be on that list. And what they would do is this: if they started a war and they wanted to,
that was very unpopular. There was a financial crisis.
They would just put.
This is why Henry Paulson under Bush in 2008 piloted the idea of declaring martial law across the country if the banks weren't bailed out.
And
it's the same people,
and they could throw people in jail. They explicitly said this, right? So, but Maine Corps didn't go away with Iran-Contra. How did it? No. What's the modern reinvention of Maine Corps?
Yeah, so Maine Corps it is the database, right? And it was the same people that created that, which was in use after 9/11, and as far as we know, still exists. The last mainstream media report on it was in 2008, and at that point, it had 3 million Americans on it. And as far as we know, it hasn't gone away, so it's likely more. But the same people that made that made this DARPA program called Total Information Awareness, or TIA.
Right.
And the goal of TIA was to basically combine with Maine Corps, but through data mining, not only decide who gets on the Maine Corps list, but also create sort of this pre-crime paradigm, predictive policing.
Pre-crime. They're really doing this. So this TIA, what does TIA stand for?
Total Information Awareness.
Now, was that a government
the program?
Was that originally a government program? But it's now been
a DARPA program.
It's a DARPA program, but now Palantir is doing this. Peter Thiel.
Now it's Palantir. Yes.
And
so
what is
TIA?
Tell people what that is.
Yeah. So Total Information Awareness was defunded by Congress not long after it was launched because every mainstream media outlet, the ACLU, and organizations like it across the board said this will end privacy for Americans. It's it's unconstitutional. So it was defunded.
And why? What did it do? What did it do?
It sucked up. It was going to basically spy on all Americans, total information awareness, right? And decide who was going to commit a crime before it happened.
Yes.
Terror attacks before it happened, bioterror, even pandemics before they happen.
Now, both sides of the paradigm are driving this into reality. Well, I mean, the point is it's already there, but we're adding to this, whether it's the Palantir data mining aspect or machine learning. You know, they're fitting out this control structure right now. And those people that are blindly adherent to the left-right paradigm, to their detriment, even, many of them even know that and don't care, are making sure that we will never be able to fight away from this. At some point, we're going to look back and go, oh my God, it's like we've said in the past. It's too late now. We can try to fight back from within this, but we're already in this problem. And right now, we are inching toward this right now. We're all seeing this because they're very aware that we're increasingly becoming more uncomfortable with our reality. And so they're desperate to control it once again. And we've seen this over the decades, over the centuries. So what we're talking about is using the left-right paradigm. I mean, even with that one point, the Israel aspect is an interesting dynamic because I still don't think the ongoing genocide was necessarily the planned aspect of this. That was just their belligerent genocidal mindset. But either way, it has caused this opening to this problem. But either way, I see all of them as being involved with trying to suppress their peoples to control them. And this is what the left-right paradigm is allowing, because these chosen technocratic oligarchs in this country are leading this problem for the most part.
Which is why a lot of the policies that originally Total Information Awareness proposed came back during the Trump administration during COVID, and Palantir was the contractor for all of those. What do you know?
So,
but anyway,
so TIA. So just to get this TIA thing, which came from Main Core. So TIA, they're going to use.
It's related to Main
So
Core.
related. So they're going to use every telephone call you ever make, every text you ever make, every Google search, every website you ever go to. They have a way of collecting all of that data.
They collect all of it.
Not the lefties collecting all the right information, right? But your government collecting it on the Americans. And largely on the right side of this conversation right now, the ones mainly backing Trump are the ones predominantly behind this data mining operation. That should concern you.
And they put it into a database on you, and they have this kind of capability. And so immediately after this was invented, you're right, all these organizations pushed back against it. So the government said, okay, we're not going to do it anymore. But then Palantir was like, well, we'll do it because we don't have those.
Well,
go ahead.
It's even worse than that. Palantir didn't exist yet. Peter Thiel created Palantir as Total Information Awareness was getting into trouble and experiencing the public backlash. And as they were setting it up, they used Richard Pearl to connect them with Poindexter, who was running Total Information Awareness, about essentially privatizing the program and having Palantir do what TIA, or Total Information Awareness, had intended to do. And Total Information Awareness, though it was housed in DARPA, was intimately pushed and developed with CIA involvement, particularly the chief information officer of the CIA at the time, a guy named Alan Wade, who was actually a business partner of Ghislaine Maxwell's sister, Christine, fun fact.
Pretty interesting, right? And so the point is that these people are the ones predominantly driving this right now. And we're goose-stepping into this problem. Here's another clip that somebody made overlapping with Elon and PayPal.
Peter Thiel co-founded PayPal back in 1998. The team around him went on to create groundbreaking startups. You've heard of them all, like YouTube, Yelp, Kiva, LinkedIn, and Tesla.
Back home smoking legal. I got more slaps than the Beatles. Foreign shit running on diesel, dog. Playing with my name, that shit is lethal, dog. Who you see? What? Don Corleone. Trust me, at the top it isn't lonely. Everybody acting like they know me, dog. Don't just say it down, you gotta show me what you gotta do. Bring the clip back empty. You asked to see the ball, so they sent me, dog. I just broke her off with a 10-piece, dog. There ain't nothing, I'm just being friendly, dog. It's just a little 10-piece for it, just to blow it in the mall. Doesn't mean that we involved. I just put a Richard on the card. I ain't going
I believe you can be both a libertarian and work with the government, or even work for the government, or work in the government.
Niggas need you to go away. Still going bad on them anyway. Saw you last night, but did it broad day. Yeah, a lot of murk caught me in a hard way. But got a sticky and I keep it at my dog's place. Girl, I left you love it magic, not all shade. Still going bad on you anyway. Whoa. can feel like 80 rats in my Marys. Me and Drizzy back to back is getting scary. If you fucking with my eyes, just don't come near me. Get out my way. Put some bins all on your head like Jason Terry.
The podcast, there's a lot in there you should watch if you haven't seen this, but they go over the you know, legitimate story, the Ambrosia overlap, and the idea of, you know, they make a joke about it on the actual sitcom Silicon Valley. It's a real thing of injecting young people's blood into yours to make you younger. Whether it's even valid or not, the science seems to suggest that they're doing this. Think about how alarming that is for so many other things, but that's in there as well.
Whoa. Richard Millie cuss a Lambo. Known to keep the baddest bitches on commando. Every time I'm in my trap, I move like Rambo. Ain't a neighborhood in Philly that I can't go. For real.
And here are some Bloomberg articles. Palantir supplying Israel with new tools since Hamas started war. See how this all comes full circle? Here's another one. Thiel's Palantir, Israel agreed a strategic partnership for battle tech. Right, the genocide ones, right? Here's a clip. I'm going to skip this for time, but this clip goes back in the day, goes over Google. This is an older one. I forget the year off the top of my head. Orwell sent this to me, but this goes back a long time ago and shows you them looking at these phones and looking about how Google tracks your every move. And they put one on airplane mode and they put the other one on both of them with the chips, the SIMs removed, everything shut down, and one on airplane mode and one not, right? Despite the SIM cards being removed and everything else, both of them tracked literally everything. And guess which one had more data on you? The one that was on airplane mode. Literally more data collected. This goes back a long time. Think about what's happening now. Think about, and on that note, that's all another reason why you should grab a privacy device. The link is in here if you'd like the above phone discussion, where we have a affiliate code and a little link in there you can grab if you want to grab one for yourself. I mean, I've been using it, and I recommend we all go in the direction of these privacy devices. And soon they're going to be making a TLAV laptop that we're putting out for you guys. Here's the link. Point is that these things today are surveillance. I mean, they've always been surveillance, but the problem is that this is a much bigger data mining operation than we realize. And this one says Palantir with Google Cloud for smart decision making. So with Google as well, right? So this overlap of Google and, the kind of counterbalance of how it's all the same thing. Palantir X Google Cloud. Now I'm going to go over this in another show, but the point here was simply how X is now pulling away from Brazil. I'll go into this more in depth. I wanted to make a point about this in general, about how ultimately they're framing themselves as pushing back against Brazil and the censorship, which to a degree, I think if in honest direction was a good thing. As Glenn would point out, there are a few people in this democratic world more powerful or tyrannical than Moraes, the guy in Brazil, the leader. So in no way is it to suggest this guy is a good person or ultimately doing it for the right reasons. But the interesting point to me is how they're using this and saying, we're going to pull out of Brazil because they tried to get us to censor. You can read the actual suggestions here, and they're saying, we want you to block accounts that we argue are problematic. And so my point, to make this quick, you could argue that's Brazil shutting down people they disagree with, and probably is. But isn't that what they're doing right now? Yes. They're censoring people from the Israel conversation in this country. They're openly telling you that, well, if you have an awful opinion, but we'll still let it be there, we'll suppress it. Okay, so let's be clear. This is hypocritical to say that, well, we don't want to do it for your interest, but we'll do it for ours here in this country or anywhere else in the world for that matter. So what I think is interesting about this is that ultimately we can prove from their own lawsuit that Twitter is already doing that. They're literally telling you, they wrote this lawsuit. It says, despite X applying the boycott of GARM, who they're a partner with, by the way, despite X applying brand safety standards comparable to those of the competitors and which meet or exceed those specified by GARM. So you're already adhering to the GARM censorship tactics. And then on top of that, we found out that Twitter has actually complied with, I think, 87%. It says almost every government request for censorship since Musk took over. So you are censoring stuff because we already know that. Only a child right now is going to pretend like they're not actually censoring. Saving free speech. It's a game. It's obvious that's not happening. But my point is that if they're telling you they're complying or exceeding GARM's requests and they're adhering to we're being played. It's obvious that we're being shown a partisan game. So when you come back to this reality, when they're telling you we can't adhere to that, and here's what he says. The decision to close the X office in Brazil was difficult, but if we had agreed, we wouldn't have it. We would have been ashamed of our actions. I don't buy that for a second. I feel like this is something more. I'll go into it more in another show. The point being, let me read what I wrote right here. And I said, oh, and I'm glad I wrote this. I said, what if Venezuela or Syria or Iran, for example, started noticing, hypothetically, not even to say this is what Brazil's doing, but just let's just say they noticed Iran, I see Elon Musk as the government contractor or asset that he is, in my opinion. Let's just say they started seeing him personally conduct a propaganda campaign to drive riots, destabilize, or simply allow the platform to be used in this way from the government perspective, right? Like Israel's doing with Twitter right now, or like Elon was just doing with Venezuela, right? And they then petition Twitter to remove state-backed actions. Now, that's very different than the conversation of censoring people that are saying things they disagree with. If you are literally seeing like the U.S. government surreptitiously do this, you would have a right to say that shouldn't be there, right? I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Same reason we would point out that Israel's doing this on this platform and we all have an issue with it. But my point is, hypothetically, if they were to say, Elon, we don't want that there. And then Elon framed it as them censoring and that we can't allow dictators to use this on the platform and, basically pull back and allow them to keep using it and promote regime change in the area. Is anybody thinking that's not possible? So all I'm highlighting is this interesting game where they appear to be taking a right stance with Brazil, if we believe that's what Brazil is actually doing, and I can't confirm that. But we need to realize, in my opinion, it probably just is setting us up to go, look, he's fighting for this. When the ultimate reality is when it interests Israel or the U.S. government, it'll be the exact opposite. I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's quite obvious. I only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to just continue. Oh, and this was what one of the lawyers in Brazil says, which I don't know. I wouldn't blindly trust anybody, but who knows what political side he's on. But he's simply saying this Texas clown is acting politically to destabilize Brazilian justice system. He faces much greater restrictions in Europe with possibilities of multi-million-dollar fines, but does not do the same. That's a fair point. He's not doing this in places that are much more important to him. He says he doesn't make a peep about China because he depends on numerous components for his cars. Okay, so you're pulling out of Brazil, but you're letting China influence what you censor. You're letting Israel influence what you censor. You're letting the U.S. government influence, or even in Europe. So doesn't that seem interesting? I think I'm not saying I support what Brazil is doing, but I can easily see if you're looking through the nonpartisan lens, like the whole show should be today, that he is selectively doing this as it interests him. And at the end of the day, ignoring a much bigger problem when it comes from people he needs something from. I find that interesting. And you can read the rest of it. I'll go through this again, I think. And then I'll include my points about GARM, which I think is just absurd. He's adhering to what they're doing. He's a partner with them. They dissolve, even though the point is, as you can prove, that they are still able to do what they need to do. Where was that? It's over here, I think. Right here. As Casey Wright points out, as Mike Benz says, shutting down GARM was actually meaningless because the system they built is actually able to operate without that umbrella. So the idea that it dissolved because of this fake lawsuit, it didn't seem to be what really happened. What do you know? My opinion, it looks like we're being played. I'll go over this again. This is just corporate media framing. My point is, I think Elon is acting like a Pied Piper for people, that he's rising up to play the role of and they're doing it, but to make it look like that's all of what's happening. So people that are honestly engaging and really breaking down the lies are the ones that get censored. Now, this point from the UK, I'll very quickly, I want to say at the end, but I wanted to go through this more. But so Tara Bull points this out and says, and she's the one that was really parading around this top 30 truth tellers, which, by the way, she updated and removed libs of TikTok. I don't know what that means. You can decide for yourself. But it's funny is that in the top it says, here are 30 accounts with integrity that you'll want to follow. But at the very end, she adds a new part now that says, as mentioned before, the majority of large accounts are compromised. What? And she does say that up here, but it doesn't say it. She says many are compromised. Now she says the majority are compromised. Many are part of influential networks designed to amplify each other and control the narrative. Is she literally talking about this group? And she says, I'm skeptical of this, which is why I created the list. So is she actually trying to make it sound like she's skeptical of these people? I don't know. It seemed like an odd ladder point after I think she got a lot of pushback for these being a bunch of manipulating liars like Laura Loomer and Cat Turd, people that are objectively not journalists. But either way, my point was you can go through these and laugh about it. It's really bad. It's really bad, the kind of people that are being presented. And so the point was that here she is pointing out this very ridiculous video. Muslim immigrants in the UK. This says, this is our country now. And she's pointing it out, which is what Elon's doing. Coming to the States soon. I mean, this is just straight up CIA propaganda. There's the clip again, so we can laugh at this bad clip.
This is our country now. You hear me, Captain? You can't stop us. There is nothing you can do about it.
My God. Now, honestly, as I said before, even the way he's trying to hide his accent sounds like a very specific type of accent. My point is, as I joked before, it sounds like Oscar the Grouch is taking over. I mean, guys, this is bad. And as Ian Carroll points out, they have white hands, by the way. Oops. This is our country now. Like, we should laugh at how really, really, really bad that was. And what's crazy about this is it's being promoted because it works with the agenda by the top 30 truth tellers, which she included her name on that list too, which I think is funny. But here this guy says, sorry, this point you, Tara, this is fake. Simply set to gain an audience on the platform. They are confined in a limited space away from prying eyes with a $1 flag. Try not to believe in all that you come across on social media. And a lot of these are her supporters, by the way. And it says it's already here. Oh, this is, damn it. I wanted to go more in depth. This is somebody else countering this with going, you're right. And apparently a Venezuelan gang already took over a complex in Colorado. More of this, as best I can tell, that's not what actually happened. Hundreds of families are forced to vacate from a Colorado apartment complex. And this is how the Gateway Pundit, a ridiculous platform, frames this. After Kamala Harris's Venezuelan migrant gang members take over the building. Well, guess what? That's certainly possible. But every single source from this conversation, including the people there, they'll be willing to tell you that there's a gang presence in this location, but none of them are arguing that they took over this building. At the actual quoted report from December, Denver 7, explicitly states that they have a crime problem with this gang in the city of Aurora. And then when you actually go into the point, this apartment complex was riddled with all sorts of sanitary problems. Now, of course, that could be the lie, and it could be covering up Kamala Harris's Venezuelan gangs, whatever dumb thing that means. I mean, if you really, let's be clear, they both support the opposition. Neither of them support Maduro. And either way, the point about all of this is if you actually read left or right, any coverage of this outside of this, they're all telling you that this is not the reality. And it's not a fact check discussion. These are directly from the locations on the ground. Here's another one that's simply highlighting this real problem in the city of Aurora, saying that Venezuelan prison gangs are operating in Denver now. And if you read the article, it makes it very clear that this is not a specific location and that this has to do with a much larger problem. And it's not just Venezuela, but who cares, right? Who cares about facts when you can boil this down to left, right, Venezuela bad, communism, let's all support the truth tellers on Twitter. It's a ridiculous show. And even Ian Carroll came around to say 2 of 3 people in the video are white, hence why they had to fake that troll-ass accent. This has paid agitator written all over it. What could possibly want Arabs and white people destroy each other? He's referencing exactly what I'm talking about. The bottom line is that these people on these top 32, this is what we get. And I think this is being raised up by Elon to manipulate the outcome for very obvious reasons. Look, I've made that point many times throughout this conversation. And unfortunately, I have to go. The reality is simply that and this point was, so we see them sharing things that I can prove to you are fake, just like that, like Venezuela 4 different times. But then they post this obvious AI thing, clear. Haters will say this is AI, he says. They're joking. It's obviously a parody. It's a joke because obviously he knows and we know he knows it's AI. But what they're doing is trying to act like this is what they're all pointing at. We're all just having fun and they're acting like we're misinforming. No, you're literally misinforming people. You are quite provably posting verifiable false things like you deleted more than once during the Maduro conversation. I covered it on the show. That doesn't mean he should be censored. It doesn't mean that, and it simply means he's misinforming. And I frankly think it's on purpose. So by downplaying it like this, like I already showed you I'm doing elsewhere, is just an effort to make it look like it's a casual game and you're being trolled. It's an easy way the right likes to ignore how obvious it is that they're being played. And I mean, right, not the conservatives everywhere, but the Republicans who are top of this manipulation game. And I'll end with that just because my point was to pull this back in, but I'm short on time. The idea is here's Trump overlapping this with Charlottesville and saying good people on both sides and how they misrepresented him, which is obvious. They lied about what he said. They cut off the clip. Anybody with a brain could have seen that. It's not a left-right point. And the thing is, always view the source material, Elon Musk says. You're right. But you see, my point was this was meant to hide the bigger picture. As they act like left versus right and hiding the point, the real point, as I showed you, was that the Rise Above movement they were using to justify everything going forward were a U.S. asset. They were an Israeli-U.S. intelligence asset that were funded, provably. The Rise Above movement, which everybody will tell you was the reason for that Charlottesville march, were the arm of the Azov movement at the time, who were being funded by the CIA in Israel. They are driving all of this like they're doing in the UK. They're creating the very chaos, the very destabilization, the very divide, the cars hitting protesters. It's easy to see. And by him pretending, look at the source material, which means look at Trump's clip that shows the extra part, he's gaslighting you. If you want to look at the source material, look at the fact that both of them, both sides, your government, were supporting the play of them marching through those streets. That's the source material. Not the Twitter file source material, but the real source material. All the source material here for you to look at for yourself, including the original document from the CIA showing you they were growing this group in Ukraine from 1948 forward. And don't forget the biolabs and the conversation of how that relates, but we're going to come back to the monkeypox conversation, which we'll get into next. Sorry to have to cut it short, guys. Just interesting time. But I thought that's probably good anyway, because the monkeypox conversation is going to continue to grow. I've got a lot to say on it, but I think a lot of people are being kind of, I'll leave it there. I think I'm worried about what it could become, but at the end of the day, I'm not convinced yet that it is what some people are hyping it up to be. So just, as always, be objective. Decide for yourself. Now, if you can't see the play happening, I argue that you're looking through a partisan lens. Now, of course, I could miss something. That's always possible. But I think it's very clear how this ties directly back to entities that seem to have no concern for what side they're using. And I just think it's in everybody's interest to be able to call that out and see how Israel, in the most desperate they've ever been in its entire existence, driving this more than ever. And the leaders of the right-wing manipulation machine are desperate to keep you from seeing that, because it threatens their control over the outcome, or rather just over the status quo, or rather their interest in maintaining it. I know you watching this, left, right, liberal, conservative, wherever you are, you're watching because you care about the truth. You sense something's off. I'm not asking you to blindly trust me, because that would be the same as everybody else. I'm asking you to do your due diligence, to look at what we're presenting and at least stand back and go, could this be the case? And I swear, if you do that just once and you actually are it's self-evident. Yes, it is happening, and you are being played, and we need to fight back. Otherwise, we're going to lose everything. That's what I believe. So thank you for being here, guys. I appreciate all your support and everything you do. We just actually put out a whole bunch of responses. It's been so buried, as you know. I've been able to get back to some of the responses to all the amazing letters and comments you send. So a lot of you might be getting something up from us in the mail, handwritten, like everything we do. So thank you for being here. We truly, truly appreciate all of you. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.